Chapter 79. Really? Amy looked at Meg and asked uncertainly. Of course it's true. Meg nodded seriously. At the same time, he asked in his mind, System, you should have all kinds of children's toys in your inventory, right? As the god of cookery cultivation system, the system will never have children's toys, the system replied righteously. Okay, then I'll take the gold coins and buy them on the street later. Meg did not hesitate at all. Well. The system's voice sounded a little hesitant. It hesitated for a moment before saying, although there is no inventory, the system's offline toy production line still exists. If the host needs any toys, the system can customize them in 5 minutes and deliver them to your door for free. The price is fair. Let's see the price later. The corners of Meg's mouth curled up, but his voice was still calm. He then looked at Amy and said with a smile, Tell me, what kind of toy does Amy want? Father will conjure it for you. Amy tilted her head and thought for a while. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she said, I want a little person who can sing. System, you don't sell human beings, do you? The first thing that flashed through Meg's mind was the little kingdom. He asked subconsciously. Selling human beings violates the second law of the system set by the heavenly axiom. Once violated, the system will be reset and the host will be directly obliterated. The system's serious voice sounded. It even sounded a little like a synthesized mechanical voice, without the slightest emotion or room for negotiation. Don't be nervous. I just mentioned it casually. Then let's make a beautiful music box. Meg originally wanted to ask if he could make a Thumbelina, but it seemed that human trafficking was the system's bottom line. He swallowed his words and thought about it. It seemed that the heavenly axiom also added some restrictive laws to the system. This reminded Meg of the 3 laws of robotics. This was not a bad thing. It meant that the system's behavior was still within the scope of restrictions. It would not collapse after the system developed self-awareness. Of course, Meg was already thinking about how to slowly pry those so-called laws out of the system's mouth. The system was such a high-end tool, so naturally, he had to understand it well before he could use it happily. With his current strength, he might not even be able to defeat a normal human, let alone a beastman or a demon. Every time something happened, he would hide behind Amy's back. Although it was quite satisfying, he still felt a little uncomfortable inside. As a father, being able to stand in front of his daughter and shield her from all the storms was the most comfortable state. Of course, he was also working hard to earn money to buy his physical fitness points. By the time he was able to wield a sword, he would be able to deal with most of the problems with the high-end swordsmanship techniques in his mind. After all, Meg Alex was a magical man who could slay dragons. As long as he had a sword in his hand, he was not afraid of anyone. In the process of earning strength points, it would be good if he could obtain more defensive and life-saving items from the system. That way, he would feel safer. The system can provide 500 mainstream music boxes. The prices range from 50 copper coins to 500 gold coins. The host can choose to purchase them. The system's voice once again sounded like an experienced businessman. Meg looked at the hundreds of pictures that appeared in his mind. The music box that cost 500 gold coins was made of pure gold. There was a little golden figure standing in the gold box, full of the aura of a nouveau riche. This was definitely not the type that Amy would like. Looking down, his eyes stopped at a music box with a price tag of 50 gold coins. It was a brown wooden box with a hemispherical glass ball on the outside. In the middle of it was a blonde elf girl in a purple dress. There was a violin around her neck. The workmanship was extremely exquisite. There was a layer of fine white snowflakes on the ground. It looked like it could simulate the scene of snowflakes fluttering in the air. There were also 50 songs on loop. The price was quite reasonable. System, I want that 50 gold coin violin girl music box. Hurry up and order it, Meg said directly. Host, are you sure you want to pay? The system seemed to be a little suspicious. After all, Meg had just haggled with it over the 10 copper coins for the takeout box. Now, he wanted a music box that cost 50 gold coins without batting an eyelid. Nonsense. If the purpose of earning money is not to spend it on Amy, then it's meaningless. Meg saw through the system's thoughts and urged, 5 minutes. If it's not ready, I'll apply for a refund. Music box order in progress. Ready in 5 minutes. Payment has been deducted, the system replied, and then fell silent. The conversation with the system and the purchase were all in his mind. With Meg's swift and decisive personality, he bought it in less than a minute. So, in Amy's eyes, he seemed to be thinking. She felt that her request was a little too much, so she shook her head and said softly, "Father, Amy doesn't want a singing villain. As long as it's something from Father, Amy will like it very much." Meg looked at the sensible Amy. Sometimes, he wanted her to be a little more willful. She was so sensible that it made his heart ache. He smiled and shook his head, saying, "No, Father wants to make a singing villain for you. It's going to be a very beautiful one. But it'll take a while. There's a little delay in the magic." Really? Amy's eyes lit up. She was looking forward to it. A singing villain? It must be very fun. She had a lot of faith in her father's words. He said that he would make a beautiful house for her, and then there was the beautiful restaurant. He said that he would make a beautiful dress for her, and now the dress she changed into every morning was very beautiful. Father had done everything he said. Meg nodded, and then said seriously, "Well, while we're waiting, I have one last question. If other children say that they like Amy, how will you respond?" This was probably a question that every father who had a precious daughter would want to ask. If the cabbage that he had carefully planted was eaten by a pig, of course he wouldn't be happy. Although Amy was only 4 years old and was still young, this kind of thing naturally had to be taught from a young age. Before she reached adulthood, before she had a complete world view and was able to distinguish right from wrong, he would extinguish the flames that tried to get close to him. This was also an important reason why he wanted to recover his strength. With a father who could slay dragons, when those people wanted to make him their father-in-law, they would first consider whether they could handle the heavy sword in his hand. Chapter 80. Meg nodded in satisfaction at Amy's answer. This was the most reassuring answer he had heard at this age. For a little girl who had no concept of love, he was quite happy to have her rely on him. As for when she grew up, if any Tom, Dick, or Harry tried to get close to Amy, he would have to break their legs. There was nothing to be reasoned with. This was the responsibility of a father, and for now, he did not want to consider what kind of man to entrust her to. Meg felt a lot more relieved after giving her 3 preventive shots. However, he really did not have much experience in raising a child. If he encountered any problems in the future, he would slowly deal with them as he saw fit. Meg thought for a moment, then looked at Amy and said, "Oh, Amy, when you call me father, you don't have to add the word person behind it. You can add the word person in formal situations or when you have a more serious conversation. You can just call me father normally." To Amy, Meg was the most important person she could rely on. He was also the only harbor that could shelter her from the wind and rain. Therefore, in the past, she had added the suffix Lord to give him a sense of respect and formality. However, because of this, she also felt a little distant from him. He had felt this way before, but at that time, Amy still had a little inferiority complex. Meg was worried that it would burden her, so he held it in and did not say anything. Now that she had completely recovered the self-confidence that a child her age should have, it was a good idea to bring it up naturally while the atmosphere of the conversation was still good. Of course, Meg was more looking forward to Amy calling him Dad. However, the term Dad did not exist in this world, so it would probably be a little inappropriate for Amy to call him that. Therefore, he could only settle for the next best thing, which was to call him Father. Father. Amy looked at Meg, a little puzzled. In her heart, whether it was in the past or now, her father was omnipotent. He was the most powerful person in the world, so she felt that father was the best way to address him. She hoped that he would always be that adult who loved and cared for her. But now, looking at her father's expression, it seemed that he did not like her calling him that. Without the word Lord, it seemed to be more intimate. Amy was conflicted for a while, but she still looked at Tang Xuanzang and nodded. "Okay, father. Well, it's okay. You'll get used to it slowly." Meg smiled and stroked Amy's hair. It was obviously impossible for Amy to completely change in such a short period of time, but it was a good thing that she was slowly changing. He wanted to become closer to Amy and become someone she could completely trust and rely on. System notification: the music box has been completed in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. It has been delivered to the second cabinet at the counter. The system can include a gift packaging service. Do you want it? At this moment, the system's voice sounded. Of course. Meg didn't even think about it. Opening the package and opening the gift box were both delightful things. A good package was also a form of respect for the gift. Of course, the most important thing was that this was a free gift from the system. This stingy system actually took the initiative to provide this service for the first time, which made him a little curious. All right, Meg, if you obediently remember Father's words today, then Father will give you a present, all right? Meg smiled. Is it a little person who can sing? Amy's eyes lit up. That's right. Meg nodded. Although it wasn't a living little person, that music box was definitely a unique toy in this world. Little Amy will remember everything, Father Amy said happily, but after realizing that she had said something wrong, she forced herself to swallow the last word. Meow tilde ugly duckling, who had been circling around the chair countless times, sat on the ground and looked up at the two of them with a resentful expression. Be good, ugly duckling. Father said he's going to give us a little person who can sing. Amy jumped down from Meg's lap and squatted down to pick up ugly duckling. She rubbed its head as she spoke. Meow, meow. Ugly duckling enjoyed Amy's touch and looked at Meg with curiosity. It also seemed to be very interested in the little person who could sing. After hearing the system's notification that the packaging was complete, Meg got up and walked over to the counter. He bent down to take a look, and saw that there was a gift box wrapped in purple paper in the second cabinet. There was even a big bow on the outside of the gift box. It really did look like a little girl's heart. He was quite satisfied with it. Amy and Ugly Duckling looked at Meg expectantly, imagining what kind of singing little person it would be. Meg reached out and took out the gift box. It was quite comfortable in his hand, but it didn't seem too heavy. He turned around and showed it to Amy with a smile. Wow, what a beautiful box. Father, is the singing little person hidden inside? Amy's eyes lit up as she walked up to him. You'll know when you open the gift box. This is Father's gift to you. Meg smiled as he placed the box on the counter. He didn't care that the little one had forgotten to change the way she addressed him in her excitement. Okay. Amy climbed onto the high stool and carefully placed Ugly Duckling on the counter. She stared at the purple gift box for a while before looking up at Meg with a conflicted expression. Father, this box is too beautiful. I can't bear to tear it open. Meg smiled. He didn't expect that such a beautiful gift box would bring such trouble to Amy. He patted her head with a smile, and said, the box is beautiful, but it's only used to hold gifts. The singing little person in the box is waiting for our Amy to become good friends with her. She must be very scared to be locked up in the box alone. Okay, I'll save her right now. Amy's eyes immediately became resolute upon hearing that. She looked at the box with an apologetic expression, and said, I'm sorry, box. I'm going to tear it open and save the little person. Under Meg's guidance, Amy successfully tore open the wrapping paper. Then, she carefully picked up the box with the lid turned upside down, revealing the music box inside. The brown wooden base looked extraordinary, and there were 2 beautiful Chinese redbud flowers carved on it. A hemispherical glass cover was connected to the base, and there was a 10-centimeter tall blonde fairy in the center. She had long eyelashes and bright eyes, and she looked very lifelike. Every string of the violin on her shoulder could even be seen. There was a layer of white foam on the floor, which looked like snow. The workmanship was exquisite, and it was completely worthy of the price of 5,000 copper coins. Wow, what a beautiful little fairy. Emi's eyes sparkled like little stars as she stared at the little elf in the box with her big blue eyes. Meow, meow tilde ugly duckling also crawled over and tilted its little head to look at the little person inside. Its eyes were filled with curiosity, and it raised its little paw to touch it. However, when it saw Amy, it didn't dare to reach out. It looked a little funny and adorable. Chapter 81. Meg shook his head with a smile. Sure enough, all'll take us in any world like takeout. He used to eat at restaurants, but he would order takeout once or twice. However, in order to avoid being sent razor blades if his address was leaked, he wouldn't complain on Weibo when he ordered takeout. Also, because of the time delay, takeout food was not as good as the freshly cooked food in restaurants. It was unfair to comment on takeout food like that. Although he was a little sharp-tongued, he didn't want to comment on a restaurant. After all, he was lazy, which was why he didn't like takeout. Besides, modern takeout mainly relied on instant information exchange. Whether it was through phone calls or direct orders through various takeout apps, the deal could only be reached after the buyer and the seller had communicated. The technology on the Norland continent wasn't that advanced, so this problem couldn't be solved in a short time. Besides, he didn't want to expand his takeout business recently. The most important thing now was to increase the number of customers. The task of 1,000 customers was imminent. Mag murmured to himself as he went into the kitchen, if you really want to deliver food, those unemployed knights would be good candidates. They have their own means of transportation, and they are usually more familiar with the streets of Chaos City. The restaurant was busy until the end of the opening hours. Meg calmly turned down the requests of several customers who had just entered the restaurant. They had sold out of Ruggiamo's, and he was indeed a little tired. Phew. Mag closed the door and heaved a long sigh of relief. He sat down on a chair at the side. Father, we sold 96 Ruggiamo's and 24 plates of Yangju fried rice for lunch today, Amy said happily to Mag, holding Ugly Duckling in her arms. That's 432 gold coins. That's a lot. Meg was also a little surprised. The turnover at noon was more than 400 gold coins. After deducting the cost of ingredients, the net profit was more than 200 gold coins. In the morning, the net profit was more than 100 gold coins. In the evening, as long as the number of Ruggiamo's could keep up with the 4-hour opening hours, the income would probably double again. What made Meg even happier was that there were 40 new customers for lunch. This speed of growth made him see the possibility of 1,000 customers in 15 days. Father's rainbow fried rice and Ruggiamo's are so delicious that they can't help wanting to eat them. Amy nodded. She squatted down and put Ugly Duckling on the ground. Then she walked up to Meg and said softly, Father, let me massage your back. Thank you for your hard work. Amy stood on her tiptoes and massaged his shoulders and back with her little fists. She was still small, so it was a little strenuous, but she still tried very hard to give him a good back massage. Meg smiled and lowered his shoulders, enjoying his daughter's massage. Although Amy was a little sharp-tongued in front of others, she was still a well-behaved daughter in front of him. As for her sharp-tongued tongue, it seemed to be hereditary. There was nothing he could do about it. He could only ask the customers to be more tolerant. Okay, Amy, give me a back massage, and I won't have to work so hard. Meg lifted Amy up with a smile. She sat on his lap, and he reached out to pinch her soft little face. Amy's face had become more and more rosy after her diet had improved. She changed into clean new clothes every day, and showered and washed her hair often. The wild child who used to run around in rags had completely become a little princess. However, if she were to become a little princess, then there would be all kinds of people with ill intentions trying to spy on her. As such, Mag decided to teach her some basic anti-deception education. Otherwise, what would he do if his innocent and adorable girl were to be kidnapped by someone else one day? Crassus came again at noon today, but there were many people eating in the restaurant at that time. Meg was busy cooking and entertaining the customers, and Amy was busy collecting money, so he sat there for more than an hour without saying much to the father and daughter. In the end, he silently ate 2 bowls of Yangju fried rice and was asked to leave the restaurant by Meg again with the excuse that business hours were over. Meg, of course, did it on purpose. This guy wanted to bring Amy to the big hole in the Magus Tower, and Meg was very against it. Even after Meg had clearly rejected him, this guy still insisted on coming to see him. It was already very nice of Meg not to put him on the blacklist. Meg looked at Amy and said with a smile, Amy, I'm going to ask you some questions and what I'm going to say to you. You have to think carefully before you answer, and then remember everything I say in your heart, okay? Okay. Amy nodded obediently, but she looked at Meg with a little confusion. What was her father going to say? His expression was so serious and serious. If a stranger told you that he wanted to bring you to eat something delicious, how would you answer? Meg looked into Amy's eyes and asked. Okay. Amy's eyes lit up, and she clapped her little hands. Meg's face darkened. The answer was exactly as he had expected. A foodie had no resistance to delicious food, but he still shook his head with a straight face and said, "That's not right. Amy, you have to remember that strangers won't really bring you to eat delicious food. Besides, is there anything better than Father's cooking?" "That's right. Father's cooking is the best." Amy nodded. After hesitating for a while, her eyes lit up and she said, "Then the next time someone tells me that, I'll let him eat at our restaurant. That way, I can even charge him for the food." This way of solving the problem is really invincible. Meg raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but want to praise Amy. The teacher who came up with the question probably didn't expect such a thing. He then asked, the second question, if someone tells you that he wants to bring you to have fun, okay. Okay. Amy immediately nodded happily, looking like she wanted to set off right away. No, that's not how you answer. Meg quickly shook his head. It seemed that Amy, who was at the age where she was active, really wanted to go out and have fun. However, this question was very important. Otherwise, it would be too easy to be abducted. Chapter 82. After putting Amy and Ugly Duckling on the bed and tucking them in, Meg went downstairs to prepare the ingredients for the evening. When he passed by the counter, he put the music box in the cupboard. It was a great tool for lulling little girls to sleep. Meg was going to make 128 Ruggiamos tonight. It would take him 2 hours to knead the dough, which was why Meg was eager to improve his strength. If he could improve his strength by 0.5, the kneading time would be reduced by at least half. As he kneaded the dough, Meg began to think about his next plan. Although he and Amy were living a happy and warm life, as a father, he wanted to make sure his daughter could live a better life. The restaurant was the foundation of his survival now and in the future. It could make him earn money as well as others' recognition and respect, which made him very happy. The restaurant was slowly getting on track, and new customers were joining every day. Although it wasn't full yet, it was enough for him to keep busy. His next goal was to sell 1,000 Ruggiamos and then unlock the tofu pudding to add one more dish to the menu. According to his current progress, he should be able to finish the task in 2 days. At the thought of the tofu pudding, Meg felt a little hungry. Even kneading the dough felt a lot more energetic. "Father." After Meg finished making the dough, Amy came downstairs with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She stood at the door and called out. Ugly Duckling grabbed her little skirt and slid down by itself. Although it had only been a few days since it was born, the little guy's vitality was quite good. It seemed to have endless energy after waking up. It jumped left and right in the kitchen and played very happily by itself. "Sit down for a while. I'll get you a glass of water." Meg looked back at Amy with a smile. When he was about to get the glass of water, Ugly Duckling suddenly bumped into his foot and froze. It looked up at Meg in a daze, and then fell back stiffly. It lay on all fours, motionless. It looked back at Amy with its watery eyes full of grievance. Is this a scam? Meg couldn't help but chuckle when he saw that. This little fellow was such a drama queen. Instead of being a boss, he started his acting career. Amy looked at Ugly Duckling with a serious expression, and said, "Ugly Duckling, I saw you bump into Father's foot. If you want to lie down, then lie down. If you get dirty, then I won't hold you anymore." Meow tilde. Ugly Duckling got up with a start and gave Meg a resentful look. It trotted to Amy's feet and rubbed against her calf. Meg poured a glass of water for Amy, and she went to play with the music box with Ugly Duckling. She must have inherited her mother's talent for music. She could hum after listening to the music a few times. It seemed that she would be able to learn it in a couple of days. Her soft voice sounded very cute. Meg looked at the time. It was only 4:30, but there were already customers walking back and forth outside the restaurant. They looked into the restaurant from time to time, trying to find Meg. People knocked on the door from time to time, but Meg chose to ignore them. Opening hours hadn't started yet, and he wanted to rest for a while after kneading the dough. Besides, he had to cook dinner for himself later. There was already a line at the door. There were about 7 or 8 people waiting. Some were quite calm, while others were a little anxious. "Why isn't the door open yet? I've been hungry since noon, so I came here early to eat Ruggiamo." A young man paced back and forth in front of the door. He wanted to knock on the door, but he drew back his hand halfway. Someone had already knocked twice, but there was no response from inside. Crassus, who was standing in the line, said slowly, "Don't worry. Mr. Mac is a punctual person. If he says the door opens at 5, he won't open it 1 minute earlier. If he says the door closes at 9, he won't open it 1 minute later. Young man, be patient and wait in line." Crassus was smiling broadly, but his tone was a little bitter. He was a 10th-tier magic caster, but now he had to wait in line at the door of a restaurant every day. If this spread back to Luo City, it would be big news. If the young Jew fried rice wasn't so delicious, and if that little girl's talent hadn't been discovered yet, this would never happen, Crassus thought to himself. Luckily, he hadn't come out for more than a decade. Even in Chaos City, few people could recognize him, so he didn't lose all his face. It's not a big deal to come early to eat Mr. Mac's Ruggiamo. You won't be able to eat it in another restaurant. Harrison, who was standing in the back, chuckled. He had made an appointment with his buddies to come in the evening, but they all had something to do. He also had something to do in the evening, so he came early to line up. It wouldn't be too late to leave after eating. "Harrison, why are you here so early? Where are the others?" A horse-drawn carriage stopped, and Gyurge, who had just gotten off, came over. He looked at Harrison in surprise. "They all have something to do, so they can't come tonight. I have something to do at home, too, so I came early to eat before going back," Harrison explained. Then he looked at Gyurge and asked curiously, "How was the young Jew fried rice I brought back for your wife at noon? Here's the dragon coin from noon." Gyurge took out a dragon coin and handed it to Harrison. He smiled and said, "She's more than satisfied. She hasn't eaten anything for days, and she finished the entire plate of young Jew fried rice without leaving a single grain of rice behind. She even said that it wasn't enough, so she asked me to buy another plate for her tonight. From now on, she'll have this for all 3 meals a day. That's all thanks to Boss Mag. You're going to be financially liberated again, right?" Harrison accepted the money without any hesitation, and patted Gyurge on the shoulder. Gyurge nodded with a smile. "That's true. But I'm afraid I won't have time to drink and play with you for a while. I'll stay at home with my wife after I bring her food." "Okay, I'll drink for you." Harrison nodded. Meg rested for a while, and then made 2 plates of young Jew fried rice. At the same time, he put the baiji bread on the table. During the meal, Ugly Duckling looked at them with puppy eyes. It looked so pitiful that Meg almost couldn't help but give it some young Jew fried rice and Ruggiamo. But before he could say anything, Amy teased it and made it turn its face away. It was 5 o'clock when Meg finished clearing the table. He opened the door and couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes. Chapter 83. The long line in front of the restaurant attracted the attention of many passers-by. This corner of the Aiden Square was mostly filled with magic potion shops, weapon shops, and other shops that sold strange things. Therefore, few people would come here unless they needed something or were just taking a walk. They had never seen such a long line in front of any shop, so many people came to take a look out of curiosity. They were confused when they saw the luxurious restaurant and the expectant faces of the customers standing in front of the door. What on earth is this restaurant selling? How dare they leave so many customers outside? Of course, what was even more surprising was that these customers just stood there quietly. 2 or 3 people who were familiar with each other would whisper a few words to each other. There wasn't too much impatience or anxiety, which was a little different from the noisy atmosphere of other restaurants. This atmosphere and sense of anticipation made some onlookers stop in their tracks. Although they didn't join the long line, they chose to stay. They wanted to see if this restaurant really had extraordinary delicacies. When Meg opened the door, he was surprised to see the long line in front of the restaurant. He didn't expect so many customers to come early, and it had successfully attracted more than 20 onlookers. Although not all of them would become customers, at least it would increase the possibility of customers coming in at night. "Mr. Mack, you finally opened the door. I've been waiting for half an hour," the young man standing in the front row said with a bit of bitterness, but more joy in his eyes. "The restaurant opens and closes according to the business schedule. You can take a look and choose your own time to dine here. Now, please come in," Mag said with a smile as he opened the door inwards. There was no apologetic expression on his face. He wouldn't spoil the customers when it came to business hours. They had to have enough time to rest and prepare. And once this rule was broken, the opening would be extended and brought forward endlessly, which was the last thing he wanted to see. He still wanted to take a day off the day after tomorrow. "I know. It's the restaurant's rule. Give me 2 large Ruggiamos," the young man said with a nod as he walked in. Although he felt that Mag was a little unreasonable in this regard, he didn't even open the door to let them, who had arrived early, in first when he saw Mag and Amy eating in the restaurant. However, for the sake of the delicious food, he could only choose to forgive him. After all, if he were to go to another restaurant, he wouldn't be able to eat such delicious food even if he stood at the entrance for a whole day. Crassus walked to the door and smiled at Meg as he said, "Mr. Mack, I'll let you think about that. Dear customer, please go ahead and order. Don't block the customers behind you," Meg said with a smile, interrupting Crassus. His smile was impeccable, and his reason was equally justified. "All right." Crassus swallowed the rest of his words, and could only walk into the restaurant with his staff. His eyes lit up again when he saw Amy playing with Ugly Duckling on the counter. He quickly walked to the table under the counter and sat down. He looked at Amy with a smile, and said, "Hello, little girl." "White-bearded grandpa, hello." Amy looked up at Crassus and also greeted him. She stared at the staff in his hand, which had a sapphire embedded at the top, and curiously asked, "Is that a staff? The kind that every magic caster must have?" "Yes, and this isn't an ordinary staff. Apart from casting magic, it's actually a melee weapon. I used it to knock the head of a giant dragon back in the day." Crassus gently stroked the staff in his hand with a smile. He suddenly missed the days when he was young and fearless. The nickname of the mad magic caster seemed to have been forgotten by everyone now. "Then you're awesome." Amy stared at the sapphire on the staff, and said absent-mindedly. Her interest was clearly focused on the sapphire that was glowing under the light. Crassus, who had wanted to brag about how he was back in the day, suddenly felt like he had punched cotton when he saw Amy's uninterested face. He smiled awkwardly and didn't continue. However, now that he had found a chance to talk to Amy face to face, Crassus wasn't in a hurry. The little girl was interested in many things, and as long as he could find something that piqued her interest, he would definitely be able to trick her. He looked back at Meg, who was walking in, and said, "Mr. Mack, I want 2 plates of Yangju fried rice. Serve them separately." "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded and went into the kitchen. He had just given Amy a lesson at noon, and now Crassus was sitting here with bad intentions, trying to trick Amy into becoming his disciple. It was a good opportunity to test the results. If there were any mistakes, he would continue to make up for it tonight. All the people in line at the restaurant's entrance had entered, but the restaurant was still not full. This was the advantage of a restaurant. There were 16 square tables for 4 people, which could accommodate 64 customers at the same time. However, most of the customers who didn't know each other sat down alone. Few people would share a table. When there were more customers in the future, this kind of treatment might not be available anymore. Sharing tables was inevitable. Many of the onlookers at the entrance came in driven by curiosity. However, many of them shook their heads and left after seeing that there were only 2 dishes on the menu, and that the price was extremely high. The owner must be crazy about money. Most of the customers who left because of the price thought so. A plate of unknown Yangju fried rice cost 600 copper coins, which was several days' salary for many people. Of course, there were also some customers who were not shy in their pockets who chose to sit down first. However, they were not in a hurry to order. They wanted to see what kind of food was served after other people's orders, and then decide whether to order a plate or not. "Mr. Mac, I brought my own chair. May I come in?" At this moment, a loud voice came from outside the restaurant. The door was pushed open, and a demon's head stuck in. Many of the customers who turned around were surprised, and some of the timid ones were a little scared. Lava demons were famous for their bad tempers, and this one didn't look like a good-tempered one at all. "Big bald guy, don't make so much noise, or I'll burn you with a fireball," Amy said to Sargeras, who was standing at the door, with a straight face. It was not good to praise someone in the restaurant in such a way that he scared them. Sargeras was scared right away. He still remembered the stinging pain when the small fireball hit him this morning. Besides, he had done a whole day's worth of guild tasks and earned 9 gold coins just to eat Ruggiamo. Of course, he didn't want to cause trouble. He lowered his voice and said, "Mr. Mac." Mag couldn't help but want to laugh at the sight of a lava demon being tamed into a little lamb. He didn't think that the lava demon would bring his own chair. He was probably shocked by the chair that cost 10 gold coins in the morning. He walked to the kitchen door and nodded as he said, "Sure, come in." Chapter 84. Sargeras stared at the Crassus and swallowed the rest of his words. He shrunk his head and sat down obediently. That year outside Rodu, he had seen a magic caster defeat a giant dragon with a fireball spell, and that magic caster was going to knock the dragon's head with his magic caster's staff. That magic caster in a white robe was sitting there, waiting for his food to be served. Sargeras could only see the side of his face, but he recognized him at once. He was still in awe of powerful humans. Although he believed that he would be able to fight a dragon after fully awakening and obtaining the sacred gear, he was still far from that goal. In the future, he would have to accept guild quests every day to earn money to eat Ruggiamos. This restaurant owner is really something. Even such a powerful magic caster comes to eat in his restaurant, Sargeras thought to himself. He felt lucky that he didn't act rashly this morning. He looked at Meg and said, "Mr. Mac, I'd like 3 Ruggiamos." After eating Ruggiamos in the morning, Sargeras only had a few wild fruits in the swamp for lunch. Killing a dozen poison arrow frogs had consumed a lot of his strength, and he was starving now. But the reward for today's mission was a little low. It wasn't enough for him to eat. He had to go to the guild early tomorrow to accept a mission with a higher reward. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded. Sargeras moved his chair to the side. The chair he brought with him was made of a few metal bars with a metal plate on top. It was simple and crude, but it looked sturdy. Sargeras brought it here to eat, so it should be able to withstand heat. Meg wasn't worried that Sargeras would burn the floor and the walls. He was on fire this morning, but he didn't leave a single mark on the floor. It seemed the system had put a lot of effort into the restaurant's materials. The floor of this restaurant is made of rocks from the bottom of Mount St. Donia, the holy land of lava demons on the Demon Islands, the system said proudly. It's highly heat-resistant. The walls are made of hard synthetic soundproofing materials, and the surface is coated with the same material. It's also highly heat-resistant. Can it withstand a giant dragon's attack? Meg asked, raising his eyebrows. The system fell into silence. After a while, it replied, "The restaurant's design is only designed to deal with normal situations. Please don't provoke the dragon. In this world, isn't it normal to encounter giant dragons? System, your design ability still needs to be improved." Meg sighed with some pity. Although he didn't expect much, if the restaurant's defense was really amazing, then he could use the restaurant as a fortress. "Host, please do not question the system's design ability. The host's current authority is too low to upgrade the restaurant. The current restaurant is already at level 0. The system's solemn voice sounded. "There are levels. How do I level up? Are you here for a quest?" Meg's eyes lit up. If the restaurant could be upgraded, it would be interesting. If it could grow, it might really become an indestructible fortress. If the host spends 50,000 gold coins in addition to the purchase of food ingredients, the host will be automatically upgraded to LVL1, the system's voice sounded. "You win." Meg was stunned. He had thought that he might need to complete some quests, but he didn't expect that he would need to spend money and 50,000 gold coins to upgrade. How greedy. After upgrading to LVL1, in addition to the free upgrade of the restaurant, many functions will be unlocked. Work hard, host, the system encouraged. I don't have money. Meg curled his lips. He was still trying to save the 10,000 gold coins to buy the strength points, and he didn't need to worry about the 50,000 gold coins in the short term. Anyway, he was quite satisfied with the current restaurant, so he wasn't in a hurry to upgrade it. Meg began to serve the dishes in the order they entered the restaurant. The 16 ruggiamos in the oven were almost done, so the customers who ordered ruggiamos first could eat first. When the second batch of ruggiamos was in the oven, he began to cook Yangju fried rice for the customers who ordered it. In the past 2 days, customers had started to line up in advance, so Morbai couldn't get to the front of the line. Although he was just next door, he had to forge weapons every day, so he came soon after the restaurant opened and ordered 2 plates of Yangju fried rice. Little girl, how about I take you to eat something delicious? Crassus looked at Amy with a smile, ready to tempt her with delicious food. Okay. Amy's eyes lit up, but then she shook her head and said, but I'm already full. How about tomorrow? If you take me to eat, you should pay, right? Of course, I'll pay. As long as it's something you like, anything is fine. Crassus's smile became even brighter. Sure enough, this little girl was a little foodie. She took the bait easily. As long as the two of them were alone, it wouldn't be difficult to check her magic talent. He could even lure her back to the Magus Tower with food. Morbai, who was sitting next to them, glanced at Crassus with narrowed eyes. He looked at Meg, who was busy cooking in the kitchen. It seemed that he had to remind Meg later. Okay, then I'll wait for you to come to eat tomorrow morning. Then you can give me the money for my share of the food. I love eating father's food the most. It's also the best. Remi nodded happily, her smile full of sincerity. Crassus, who was going to praise the delicious food in Rhodu and make Amy yearn for it, froze. He felt as if he had stepped into a hole he had dug himself. But when he thought about it carefully, he felt that it made sense. Not to mention Chaos City, even in Rhodu, he hadn't found any food that could make him eat 2 bowls of it for many years. But Meg's Yangju fried rice made him want to eat 2 bowls of it for every meal. Telling the daughter of the owner of such a restaurant that he would take her to eat delicious food was indeed a bit thoughtless. Now that he had fallen into a pit and jumped into it happily, he could only nod helplessly and say, okay, then I'll come over tomorrow to pay for you. You're so nice, Grandpa Whitebeard. Amy nodded. It felt so good to eat in her own home and have someone pay for her. Morbai was also stunned, and almost laughed out loud. He glanced at Amy, and felt that his worry was completely unnecessary. This girl was not someone who could be tricked by ordinary people. All of the customers waiting for their food to be served were also looking at Amy with great interest. This half-elf little girl was so adorable, and her words were also very interesting. Even though she could often make people choke on their words, it was still a source of amusement for the onlookers during their meals. Chapter 85. The 5 snow-white figures waved their hands and danced in a small circle on the table as if they were dancing around a bonfire. They attracted everyone's attention immediately. To normal people, this scene was naturally very magical. The reason why humans were able to occupy a place on the continent was not only because of the brave knights, but also because of the powerful mags. During the racial wars of the past, they often turned the tide of the war. After the war, the royal family of the Roth Empire promoted the magic casters to a higher position. They set up a Magus Tower, and conferred the powerful magic casters as worshippers. They had a transcendent status in the empire. Therefore, humans were very respectful of magic casters. Although Chaos City was not under the jurisdiction of the Roth Empire, the status of humans in Chaos City was maintained by the Roth Empire's powerful backing. Now that they saw Crassus in a Magus robe performing magic, the customers were more or less respectful. They couldn't help but look at Amy. Even they found such a magical spell interesting. A girl of Amy's age would definitely like it more. But, can your little snowman sing? Amy asked with a shrug as she looked at the little snowman dancing on the table. She didn't look very curious. Ugly Duckling also peeked its head out to take a look before withdrawing its head back in displeasure. Its little eyes were filled with disdain. Sing, sing. Crassus was taken aback. He looked at the little snowman dancing in front of him. It was no problem for him to do some difficult movements, but singing was a little difficult for him. After all, he was beaten by his master several times because he couldn't recite magic spells properly. He shook his head with a smile, and said, "Little girl, it's impossible for a snowman created by magic to sing." The customers were also a little surprised when they heard that. They didn't expect a dancing snowman to not satisfy Amy. Wasn't it a little too much to ask for a singing request? Even that old magic caster said that a snowman created by magic couldn't sing. But, my snowman can sing, and yours is too ugly. Amy shook her head as she looked at the little snowman in front of Crassus with disdain. A snowman that can sing and dance? That's impossible. It doesn't exist. Crassus shook his head, not believing Amy's words. The guests also had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Unless it was a race of little people that had never appeared on the continent, how could there be little people that could sing and dance? In the kitchen, the corners of Meg's mouth curled up slightly. He was quite satisfied with the effect of his anti-cheating education in the afternoon. Now that he saw his girl preparing to show off her new toy, he felt even more amused. "All right, since you don't believe me, I'll have to show you. Father turned me into a little person who can sing," Amy said helplessly. She bent down to take the music box out of the cabinet and gently placed it on the counter. Everyone looked over curiously. When their eyes fell on the music box, their eyes lit up. So beautiful. A girl sitting not far from the counter couldn't help but exclaim softly with her mouth slightly agape. The exquisite wooden box was covered with a spherical transparent crystal, and inside the crystal was a beautiful fairy holding a small musical instrument. It was so exquisite and beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off it. Wow! The other customers had similar expressions. Although it wasn't a shiny object, just the hemispherical transparent crystal cover without any impurities was enough to amaze them. And Meg had actually turned it into an exquisite toy for Amy to play with. This level of pampering was probably limited by something that limited their imagination. Looking at the dancing snowmen in front of Crassus, they looked a little shabby compared to the fairy wearing a purple dress in the crystal. Their originally cute dance became a little comical. This isn't conjured at all, Crassus confirmed in his heart after taking a look at the music box. There wasn't the slightest magical wave on it. It seemed that Mr. Mac had deliberately lied to Amy, but he didn't expose him. Meg's behavior didn't make him feel disgusted. It wasn't easy for a man to raise a little girl alone. But can it really sing? Crassus was a little doubtful. Since there wasn't even any magical wave, the little fairy who was obviously a puppet couldn't dance, let alone sing. The customers also looked at it curiously. The appearance of this thing was stunning, but Amy had just said that her little fairy could sing. They didn't know if it was true or not. Sing? Of course it can. Amy pressed the switch on the side of the music box. Little girl picking mushrooms. The edge of the music box lit up, and a pleasant singing voice sounded. The fairy girl inside also started to move. She played the musical instrument in her hand and spun in circles. It looked very lively, as if she was really a little fairy. How? How is this possible? Crassus stared at the singing little fairy with wide eyes. Although he could feel a slight wave of energy, it definitely wasn't magic. If it wasn't magic, how could this little puppet sing and dance? Moreover, he had just denied it 3 times in a row. Now, not only could Amy's little fairy sing, but it was also singing very well. Her voice was ethereal, just like a real fairy singing cheerfully. His expression suddenly became a little awkward. After living for so long, he didn't express his opinions much after he turned 100 years old. He didn't expect to suffer such a big setback in the hands of a little girl today. If it weren't for the fact that his face was thicker due to his age, he probably would have taken off his magician robe and found a hole to hide in. It was so embarrassing. He slowly lowered his eyes. He wanted this episode to pass peacefully. The customers wouldn't embarrass an old man like him too much, right? It can really sing, and it sings very well. But is this a children's song? Why haven't I heard it before? The girl next to him listened to the song. She was a little surprised, but also a little puzzled. The song was ethereal and beautiful, and the lyrics taught children to be hardworking and willing to share. It should be the kind of children's song that was easily passed down, but she had never heard it before. It was really strange. Amy reached out to turn off the music and looked at Crassus seriously. Look, Grandpa Whitebeard, the mushroom fairy can sing and dance. Isn't your little snowman not fun at all? The customers listened to Amy's words and looked at Crassus with strange expressions. Chapter 86. Sargeras, who was sitting at the door, tried to hold back his laughter. His shoulders were heaving up and down, and he was covering his mouth with his big hand. He was trying his best not to make any noise, but he still couldn't hold back his laughter. If he wasn't afraid of Crassus' terrifying power and Amy's rules, he would have laughed out loud already. The customers at the side glanced at the demon, who was a little prone to laughter, and when he laughed, they slowly moved to the next table. Even if they had to share a table with others, they wanted to stay away from Sargeras. Feeling the gazes on him, even Crassus couldn't stand it anymore. He forced a smile, and was about to say something to ease the atmosphere. Then Mag came out with a bowl of Yangju fried rice and put it in front of him. "Here's your Yangju fried rice," Mag said with a smile. "Mr. Mac, how did you make this little guy who can dance and sing?" Crassus looked at Meg, and his eyes lit up. For one thing, he wanted to divert the attention, and for another, he was really curious about what this little guy was. He didn't think it was magic, because there were no magic elements that he was familiar with. But other than magic, what else could explain this little guy who could sing and move on his own? Everyone's eyes also landed on Meg. They were all very curious. What kind of person is this Mr. Mac? Not only is his food delicious, but he can also make such an exquisite and interesting thing. Is he really a powerful magic caster? This is not ordinary magic. There is something else. It's a little complicated to explain, and you might not understand it, Meg said seriously as he looked at Crassus. I might not understand it. Crassus felt that he was being looked down upon, but after opening his mouth, he felt that Meg's words made sense. He had been dealing with magic his whole life, and knew very little about things outside of magic. Even his interpersonal skills were horrendous. Otherwise, with his status, all of the prodigies in Rodu would be sent to the Magus Tower for him to take in as his disciple. There was no need for him to come all the way here to find a disciple. He wouldn't have gotten to where he was now, where he had to put his old face on the line just to dupe a restaurant owner's daughter into doing a talent test. Seeing that Crassus had no intention to continue asking questions, Meg turned around and walked towards the kitchen. He didn't use the pile of mechanical theory that he had prepared. Although it was just some professional knowledge from his university days, it should be very effective in scaring people. After all, he did get a diploma from one of the top 20 universities in the world. Amy smiled sweetly at Meg, as if she was asking for credit. Meg glanced at his greasy hand and did not reach out to rub Amy's hair. Instead, he smiled at her affectionately before entering the kitchen. Amy's performance could be said to be impeccable. She had done more than what he had told her to do this afternoon. If he were to see her like this, Crassus would probably start to doubt his life. Harrison took a bite of his Ruggiamo and looked at Meg's back, his fat jiggling as he said, "Whether he is a magic caster or not, I think Mr. Mac is a very powerful person." "I agree." Gyurge nodded, his fat jiggling as he sat opposite him. At the same time, he couldn't help but look at the music box in Amy's hand, and murmured, "I wonder if Mr. Mac will sell this thing. Palmer will love it if he sees it." The other customers looked at the two people who were behaving exaggeratedly, and nodded thoughtfully. They also felt that Meg was not an ordinary person. Sargeras tried hard to hold back his laughter, but it made him feel even hungrier. However, he still sat there obediently and waited for his food to be served. He didn't ask the owner to serve his food eagerly or threaten to smash the restaurant as he used to do. After all, even a 10th-tier magic caster could not do anything here. Sargeras was a bit hot-tempered, but he had traveled the continent for 50 years without encountering any major dangers. In fact, he was quite well behaved. After eating a few mouthfuls of fried rice, Crassus saw that the other customers were immersed in the joy of the food and did not continue to pay attention to him. He looked at Amy, who was lying on the counter, rubbing the kitten's head while staring at the little elf in the music box, and his thoughts started to run wild again. After thinking for a while, Crassus smiled and said, "Little girl, what I just said is actually not important. Misfortune may befall the Norland continent one day, whether it is a natural disaster or a man-made one. At times like this, the powerful people can protect themselves and the people around them with their own abilities. And I have such an ability. Don't you want to learn magic and protect the things you want to protect?" "I want to protect father." Amy thought seriously for a while, and looked back at Meg in the kitchen with a determined look in her eyes. Meow tilde ugly duckling raised its head and meowed, trying to make its presence known. "Not including you." Amy reached out and pressed Ugly Duckling's head down. Meow tilde ugly duckling meowed a little aggrievedly. Its voice was soft and seemed to be a little heart-wrenching. "That's right. If you want to protect someone, you have to be powerful first. If you learn magic from me, you will be able to master this ability very quickly." Crassus nodded with a smile, trying to make himself look like a kind and reliable master. Although Meg had mercilessly rejected his similar words yesterday, he still wanted to confirm whether Amy had the talent to learn magic first. If she really did have exceptional talent and was suitable to inherit his legacy, he would do his best to satisfy all of Meg's requests. After all, he was going to die in 2 years, and there was nothing he cared about anymore. "Millimetem, I also think you're right." Amy nodded, but before Crassus could smile, she looked at him suspiciously, and said, "But Grandpa Whitebeard, you can't even walk properly, and you can't even protect yourself. You want to teach me how to protect father? My opponents are only children about the same age as me." "Well." Crassus's expression stiffened again. This little girl's little brain was full of all kinds of things. She didn't follow the normal routine at all. "Also, what the hell do you mean by your opponents are children?" Crassus raised his eyebrows. His opponents had been orcs since he was 18 years old. When he was 24 years old, he smashed a giant dragon's head with his staff for the first time. Although it was a low-energy green dragon, he started to climb to the top after that. Bullying children had nothing to do with him. Chapter 87. The conversation between Crassus and Amy attracted the attention of the customers again. Some of the regular customers had seen Amy attack Sargeras in the morning. Even with the lava demon's resistance, he was almost burned by that small fireball. Now, Crassus was asking Amy to attack as she pleased. Wasn't he being a little too arrogant? Look at that purplish gold magic caster's staff mark on his magician's robe. If I remember correctly, only the robes of the magic casters worshipped by the Roth Empire would have that mark, right? Right at this moment, a middle-aged man dressed like a merchant stared at Crassus' left shoulder with a shocked expression. There was a purplish gold magic staff embroidered on that shoulder. It really is. Could this old magic caster be worshipped by the Empire? His companions at the same table were also surprised to hear that. They looked at the mark on Crassus' shoulder. That was the highest honor that a human magic caster could receive. No one dared to impersonate one. The conversation between the two fell into the ears of the people around them, and they couldn't help but look at Crassus' shoulder. Although most of them had never seen a worshipped magic caster in person, they had heard all kinds of rumors about them. After the death of General Alex in battle, the Empire's military hadn't seen a griffin knight who could slay a dragon on his own for a long time. In the past few years, when evil giant dragons appeared to attack the Empire's cities and towns, the worshipped magic casters appeared. They used powerful magic to drive away the evil dragons and protect the peace of the land. They were increasingly respected and loved by the people. Furthermore, the worshipped magic casters of the Empire were at least 8th-tier magic casters. Every one of them was extremely powerful, and had made great contributions to the Empire. If this white-robed magic caster was a worshipped magic caster of the Empire, then he was at least an 8th-tier magic caster with a high status. He was a senior that most magic casters would have to take off their hats to show respect to, But he had been humiliated by Amy time and time again. From what he had just said, it seemed that he wanted to take Amy as his disciple, but the little girl didn't seem to be interested in him. When did it become so difficult for a magus of the 8th rank to take in a disciple? The same question flashed through everyone's minds at the same time. If Amy was too young to understand, then with Meg's ability to set up such a multidimensional restaurant, he should be able to recognize the mark of an imperial consecrator, right? However, even after Crassus expressed his interest, Meg was still calm and did not seem to be tempted at all. This unusual behavior surprised everyone, and they began to speculate about Meg's identity and strength. For example, maybe Mr. Mac doesn't like that old magician? Could it be that he is even more powerful than this old magician? As for Crassus's invitation to Amy, after knowing his identity, everyone felt that there was no more suspense. One was a magic caster of the Roth Empire, and the other was the little daughter of the restaurant owner who could not even walk properly. The difference in status and strength between the two could be said to be the difference between heaven and earth. Even if Crassus stood there without moving, Amy would not be able to do any harm to him. A magic caster who can defeat a giant dragon with a fireball is not only an 8th tier magic caster, but at least a 9th tier, or even a 10th tier magic caster, Sargeras thought to himself. The scene outside Rodu that year was etched in his memory. However, after looking at Amy, Sargeras's expression became a little strange. Even a 10th tier magic caster would suffer if he underestimated this little girl's fireball magic, just like he did in the morning. Although that fireball was small, its power was not small at all. Its temperature was even higher than the flames on his body. She had such terrifying talent at such a young age. If he were a magic caster, he would probably want to take her as his disciple. Hearing Crassus's words, Amy was suddenly interested. She said in disbelief, "White-bearded grandpa, are you serious? If I use this fireball, you might die." "Of course I'm serious, little girl. Just use all your strength. Don't worry about me. If I can't even block one of your fireballs, then I can only bully children." Crassus waved his hand confidently. However, he was still a little touched by the little girl's concern. Hearing Amy admit that she could use a fireball magic, he was even more delighted. This meant that even if the bloodline of the two races was limited, she could still use magic. She was still a little malleable. However, he would only know how talented she was when he saw her up close. "I'm just worried that I might accidentally burn the chair and table." Amy looked at the table in front of Crassus worriedly. Crassus did not know how to express his feelings at that moment. He did not expect that he could not even compare to a table and chair. Depressed, he could only say helplessly, "It's okay. If you burn it, I'll pay you the price." "All right, since you've asked so sincerely, then I'll have to throw a fireball at you." "This kind of request is really annoying." Amy nodded. She looked at Ugly Duckling as if she were looking at a naughty child. She put Ugly Duckling on the other side of the counter, and reminded Crassus, "If you can't stand it, remember to call me out as soon as possible." "That won't happen." Crassus shook his head with a relaxed expression. He had the demeanor of a grandmaster. "Then I'm coming." Amy looked at Crassus and reminded him. She put her little hand in front of her, and a ball of flame suddenly appeared in front of her. It suddenly contracted into a small bluish-purple fireball, and she threw it at Crassus just like that. This is pure magic power. Crassus' eyes were already wide open when he saw the ball of flame appear in Amy's hand. He looked at the shrinking bluish-purple ball of flame. The magic power in it was so pure and clean, and it was not affected by other elements at all. Although it was only a small fireball, it had such amazing power. Of course, a fireball of this level was just a small flame to him, but he saw endless possibilities in this flame. At the age of 3 or 4, she had not received any magic instruction, but she had actually figured out the fireball spell on her own. Furthermore, she was able to cast it instantaneously. She even knew how to throw it. Wasn't this the kind of talent that he had been looking for? Most importantly, his favorite spell was this simple and crude fireball spell. It was hard to say about other spells, but when it came to the fireball spell, he dared to say that his fireball spell was the fastest and the most powerful spell on the entire Norland continent. No one would dare to say that they were even the second best. After all, Even when he faced a giant dragon, he would directly use the fireball spell to greet it. Furthermore, he could smash those big fellows all over the place. He was the only one on the entire continent who could do that. While he was in a daze, the fireball had already landed on his long beard. It ignited immediately, and rose up in a whoosh. Chapter 88. The customers, who were expecting Crassus to casually take on Amy's fireball, watched as Crassus ran to the door with his beard on fire. The atmosphere became a little awkward as a faint burnt smell wafted in the air. Sigh, Grandpa Whitebeard's opponents must be children. Amy withdrew her hand, and said with resignation. She felt a little lonely as she waved at Ugly Duckling, intending to continue petting it. Ugly Duckling ran to the other end of the counter and confirmed that there was no more fireball in Amy's hand. Then, it trotted over and nestled in Amy's arms in a comfortable position. The customers, who were still feeling awkward, couldn't help but laugh when they saw this scene. They wondered if the worshipped magic caster whose beard was burned would get angry later. If he got angry, Meg's restaurant might not be able to withstand it. I really can't underestimate him. Even a 10th-tier magic caster can easily fall into his trap if he's caught off guard. Sargeras nodded with satisfaction. Indeed, no matter what kind of trap he was in, he felt much better after seeing someone step into it with him, especially when that person was much more powerful than him. Meg turned to look at the door, and frowned slightly. Crassus was the one who asked to take action. His goal since yesterday was to find out how talented Amy was, so he didn't have to worry about him getting angry. What he was worried about was that Remi's aptitude had caught his eye, and that Remi would come to his restaurant every day to harass him. Even though the situation was already like this, there was no way that he was going to back down on Remi's decision to go to Rodu. Crassus opened the door and rushed out. He pointed at his beard, and a ball of water exploded on it. The bluish-purple flames that were spreading up his beard were instantly extinguished. Water splashed all over the floor, and some of the beard was burned to black ashes. Some splashed on his white magician robe, making him look very disheveled. However, Crassus, who should have been frustrated and angry, was now ecstatic. He couldn't help but look up at the sky and laugh. He looked a little crazy, which made the customers in the restaurant stop smiling and look at the door anxiously. This old magician's beard was burned. Could it be that he went crazy? If a magician above the 8th level got angry, he could raise the entire restaurant to the ground with a single spell. Looking at his current state, it seemed that he was not in a stable state. Grandpa Whitebeard must be crazy. If I had known, I wouldn't have burned his beard. I don't even know if it can grow back. Amy looked in the direction of the door, feeling a little conflicted. If he didn't grow back, she would have to give him a new nickname. Crassus's weird laughter didn't last long, because he soon realized that he had lost his composure. He stopped laughing and adjusted his expression. He wanted to touch his beard, but there was nothing in his hand. He looked down and saw that his white beard, which was originally more than 20 centimeters long, was now less than half of it. The bottom part was charred black, and it looked a little miserable. He had kept this beard for decades and carefully maintained it every day. He had strict requirements for its length. Usually, he would be distressed if a strand of hair fell off, but now it had become like this. If it was someone else who did it, even if it was a giant dragon, he would have smashed 3 big holes in his head with his magician's staff. But now, the one who did it was Amy. Moreover, he was the one who sincerely asked her to throw a fireball and promised that nothing would happen to him. Now, he had dug a hole for himself and jumped into it. He felt a little wronged, but there was no one to reason with. Forget it. Why should I compete with my precious disciple? With such talent, even if she only knows one fireball spell, she will be able to unleash my great fireball spell to the extreme. I won't look for anyone else. She's the one. However, Crassus quickly adjusted his mood. Thinking back to that pure fireball spell just now, his heart could not help but beat faster. He had walked all the way south from Rodu for more than half a year. He had seen many prodigies, but he always felt that they were a little different from what he expected. The moment Amy released that fireball spell, he knew that he had finally found the most suitable disciple for him. With a smile on his face again, Crassus waved his hand and threw 2 cleansing spells on himself. His magician's robe was soon refreshed, but there was no way to restore his stubble for the time being. He pushed open the door and entered the restaurant again. This old guy values his beard more than his life. Now that his beard is gone, he is still smiling. Looks like that little girl's talent is better than I thought. I have to act in advance, too. Otherwise, it would be bad if that old thing beat me to it. Snatching a disciple is better than finding one himself. That old thing's eye for talent has never been bad. At the entrance of the magic potion shop, Julian looked at Crassus, who had turned to enter the restaurant, and softly murmured to himself before turning to enter the shop. The customers, who were originally worried that Crassus would attack them in a rage, or at least come in to denounce them angrily, were all stunned when they saw Crassus enter the shop with a smile on his face. What is going on now? Amy looked at Crassus, who had sat down at the table again, and seriously said before he could say anything, "Say no more, half-beard grandpa. I think I can teach you how to defeat children. If you really want to learn, I can give you a cheaper tuition fee." Phut! Sitting at the door, Sargeras took out the water he had brought with him and spat it out. This time, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. A 10th-tier great magic caster was being scolded by a 4-year-old girl, and she wanted to teach him how to defeat children. This was a great magic caster who had defeated a giant dragon with a fireball spell. In the 50 years he had traveled on the Norland continent, this was the first time he had seen something so funny. The restaurant suddenly fell silent. Everyone was staring at Sargeras. The 2 customers sitting next to Sargeras slowly moved away from him as if they wanted to get as far away from him as possible. Although they were amused by Amy's old-fashioned words, they were sober enough to not laugh at a magic caster who was worshipped by the Empire. Otherwise, they could be punished by a fireball spell in the next second. In the Roth Empire, there was a written rule that magic casters could punish anyone who insulted a magic caster. If the situation was reasonable after an investigation, the magic caster would not be held responsible. Chapter 89. His white beard had turned into a half-beard, and he had been taught a lesson by the little girl. Crassus swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. He blushed and glared at Sargeras when he thought of what he had just said. Although Sargeras was a little flustered, he wasn't easily amused. He had been trying to hold back his laughter, but after hearing Amy's words, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He had to turn his head away to avoid Crassus's gaze. He covered his mouth and continued to laugh, his shoulders shaking exaggeratedly. This was the funniest thing he had seen in decades. "Half-beard grandpa, don't scare Big Baldy. He'll get angry too. If he burns off the rest of your beard, you'll become a beardless grandpa," Amy reminded Crassus. "Actually, it was just a small accident. I can also use the fireball spell you just used, and mine is bigger and more powerful." Crassus turned to Amy with a big smile on his face. "Your second plate of Yangju fried rice." Meg walked out of the kitchen and put the second plate of Yangju fried rice in front of Crassus. He looked at him seriously, and said, "And as I said, Amy is still young. I'm not going to let her leave me to study magic elsewhere. If she wants, I'll find a suitable teacher for her to study in Chaos City." The customer, who was surprised that Crassus didn't lose his temper, was even more shocked when he saw Mag interrupt Crassus as soon as he stepped out of the kitchen. And it sounded like this wasn't the first time Meg had rejected Crassus. She must be very talented to be able to make him swallow his pride and try to bypass Meg to make Amy interested in him. He actually rejected him directly. Harrison looked at Meg with his mouth slightly agape. Being accepted as a disciple by a magic caster worshipped by the Roth Empire was something that would bring honor to the family. Every year, countless people would do everything in their power to send their children to the Magus Tower in Rodu. Even if they were sent there as servants, they were hoping that some magic caster would take them in as a disciple one day. But now, Crassus had taken the initiative to ask Amy to be his disciple, and Meg had rejected him directly because he didn't want Amy to leave his side. I think this reason is very easy to accept. If I had such a lovely daughter, I wouldn't let her leave my side, either. Not even a magic caster. Gyurge looked at Meg and stood firmly on his side. Yes, father. I won't leave my side. Half-beard grandpa, If you really want to learn magic, I'll teach you when I'm free. I'm my hands. I'm Amy Crassus's head. I'll continue eating. Crassus looked at the determined Meg and Amy, who wanted to be his disciple. He picked up his spoon silently and continued eating his Yangju fried rice with a slight frown. His initial idea was to take Amy back to the Magus Tower for her education. The Magus Tower had been constantly renovated and remodeled by the royal family of the Roth Empire. It was now the most suitable place to practice magic on the continent apart from the elven fantasy mystic realm. But now, it seemed that Meg was very determined not to let Amy leave his side. He didn't lack money, and with his cooking skills, he chose to stay in the city in the chaos and open a restaurant. He probably didn't care about the power of the Roth Empire, and he hadn't shown any interest in magic from the beginning. The three things that Crassus had the most advantages seemed to be worthless in Meg's eyes, and his love for Amy was more important than anything else. He didn't know what to offer to tempt Meg. He was a little troubled. Meg glanced at Crassus, who didn't continue to pester him, and went back to the kitchen to continue cooking. After Crassus revealed his identity, he was indeed a little worried. After all, he was a powerful magic caster. If he wanted to do something to him, he wouldn't be able to resist. The main reason why Remi was able to burn off his beard was because he was in a daze and underestimated her at the beginning. The difference between the two of them was like the difference between an elephant and an ant. Fortunately, this Crassus seemed to be quite reasonable. He didn't use his identity and power to force them. However, he wouldn't change his mind about going to the Magus Tower. It was too dangerous there, and he couldn't let Amy go alone. After Crassus lowered his head and focused on eating, this little farce during the meal gradually calmed down. Both parties didn't fight to the extent of drawing swords, so it was more like a joke between Amy and Crassus. However, everyone had confirmed one thing today: Mr. Mac's daughter was not to be trifled with. She even dared to burn the beard of a magic caster worshipped by the Roth Empire. They would have to pay for their meals obediently in the future. After the dishes were served, the customers were soon immersed in the delicious food, and enjoyed the pleasant feeling brought by it. Many customers who had come in out of curiosity couldn't help but order one when they smelled the tempting aroma in the air and saw the customers' happy faces. They wanted to taste the delicious food, even if it was just for once. After serving 3 Ruggiamos to Sargeras, Meg reminded the customers who had just come in to move aside, because Sargeras's reaction to the Ruggiamo was a little exaggerated. Whoosh! As expected, after taking a big bite of the Ruggiamo, Sargeras spat out a ball of flame from his mouth. The lava on his body reappeared, and flames rose from his skin. Fortunately, he had learned his lesson this time. He sat on the iron chair he had brought with him, some distance from the table and the wall behind him. Although the Ruggiamo in his hand wasn't burning, he still ate it with relish, which attracted the attention of the others. "Mr. Mac, can I take away 2 plates of Yangju fried rice? My wife and children love your Yangju fried rice," Gyurj said to Meg with a smile after taking the second Ruggiamo. "Now we can only take away 1 plate of food per person, because we need to satisfy the customers who come in first." Meg shook his head. There were more and more new customers today, and the number of people who came in for the 1,000-person mission was steadily increasing. Therefore, he had to set a limit on takeaway. "I see." Gyurj pondered. He had promised his wife and children that he would take dinner for them. If he could only take 1 plate of food back, it would be a little hard to explain. The 2 children, who already knew how to eat, had snatched half a bowl of food from Miranda at noon, and had complained that they didn't want to eat tonight. Chapter 90. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded and walked to the kitchen. He saw Harrison's look, but since they were ordering separately, it didn't conflict with the rules, so he didn't say anything. It wasn't a big deal for best friends to do this kind of thing, and he wasn't that inflexible. Palmer and Parber have also fallen in love with this Yangju fried rice, haven't they? Harrison asked Gyurj with a smile after Mag entered the kitchen. "Yes, the 2 little ones love it so much. Even Angus wants to have a taste. However, the little ones have just started to grow their teeth, so they can only eat a little egg." Speaking of children, Gyurj's smile was exceptionally bright. "Okay, Then I'll take my share back to the kids. Tell them Uncle Harrison bought it for them, and I'll take them to the racecourse next time. Harrison nodded with a smile. Okay. The kids are still talking about your 2 little white horses. György nodded, and the 2 of them began to talk about the stud farm. Harrison's family had a stake in a stud farm, and he'd even asked György if he wanted to invest some money to buy some horses and expand the stud farm. It would be more interesting if it was a large stud farm like the ones in Rodu that could be used for horse racing. Crassus finished 2 plates of young Jew fried rice quietly. He still couldn't think of a way to persuade Meg, so he was a little depressed. He had a few old friends in Chaos City, but he couldn't bring himself to ask them for help for this kind of thing. Moreover, if those fellows were to come up with a solution, it would most likely be knives and gold. He did not want his precious disciple to learn magic from him unwillingly from the start. Without initiative, one would not be able to learn magic well, because the process was destined to be boring. Half-beard Grandpa, don't be sad. Although I can't go far with you to teach you fireball magic, you can stay here and let me teach you. You can go home after you learn it, Amy said to Crassus with a serious look. Amy looked at Crassus and said seriously. White-bearded Grandpa's beard had been burned by her. He seemed to be quite pitiful. Not only was he unable to walk properly, but his magic was also very poor. It was really worrying. However, Crassus's eyes lit up at the sight of Amy's pitiful gaze, as if he had been enlightened. If he had been more flexible, he wouldn't have had to return to the Rodu Magus Tower. Perhaps Meg would have agreed. However, if that was the case, then the original plan had to be changed. He had to get them to transport some things to Rodu. Young lady, the bill please. Thinking of this, Crassus took out 2 dragon coins and placed them on the table with a smile on his face. That's a total of 12 gold coins. It's 8 gold coins for your change. Amy took 2 dragon coins from the table and handed 8 gold coins to Crassus. She looked at him strangely and thought to herself, is it such a good thing to learn fireball from me? Goodbye, young lady. Crassus put away the gold coins, picked up his magic caster's staff, and walked towards the door with a smile on his face. Although it might be a little troublesome, on second thought, he didn't want to go back to the Magus Tower where he had stayed all his life. It was so gloomy. That guy used to call it the Coffin Tower. In comparison, the air in Chaos City seemed to be filled with the smell of freedom. More importantly, he could eat delicious food here and take in a precious disciple. The rest of his life was quite good. The customers watched Crassus leave with a little confusion in their hearts. They didn't understand why his mood had suddenly improved. Sargeras lowered his head slightly, and didn't dare to look into Crassus' eyes. He had thought Crassus would scold and warn him, but he just glanced at him and opened the door to leave. Phew! You scared me. Sargeras heaved a sigh of relief. He looked back at Crassus' receding figure and continued to bite into the Ruggiamo in his hand. He could clearly feel his blood boiling, and it kept breaking through the bottleneck in his bloodline. There seemed to be something that he longed for sealed in there. The impact wasn't strong, but it gave him unprecedented hope. He was addicted to the feeling that he could evolve as long as he kept eating Ruggiamo. Right. If it works for me, it should also work for the lava warriors. Most of them haven't reached the second stage of evolution yet, so the effect should be stronger. I should go back and ask them to come and try this Ruggiamo. Then I'll set up an adventure team to do high-level missions and earn money to buy Ruggiamo. Sargeras nodded. The lava demons had been quiet for many years, and it was time for them to show their prowess. After thinking for a while, he murmured to himself, why don't we call ourselves the Burning Legion? After a busy night, Meg refused to order any more food at 9 o'clock. After the remaining customers finished eating and paid, he closed the door and let out a long sigh of relief. He was a little tired after 4 hours of non-stop work. He sat down on a chair at the door, and decided to take a rest before cleaning the restaurant. Father, we sold 305 Ruggiamos and 76 rainbow fried rice today, Amy said as she walked over and put Ugly Duckling on the ground. She stood on her tiptoes and began to massage Mag's back. Father, we sold 305 Ruggiamos and 76 rainbow fried rice today. Yes. The income doubled. Meg's eyes lit up. After deducting the cost, The net income was more than 900 gold coins. It was a good decision to increase the supply of Ruggiamo today. In the evening, there were more than 50 new customers. Most of them were regulars, and some were attracted by the lively atmosphere in the restaurant. The progress of the 1,000-person mission had been reached. At this speed, the mission should be completed in 15 days. More than 400 Ruggiamos had been sold. According to the current progress, the mission would be completed in 2 days, and the tofu pudding would be unlocked. The thought of having a bowl of piping hot tofu pudding filled his heart with excitement. "Father, we've been eating Ruggiamo for several days. When will there be something new?" Amy asked expectantly as she massaged Meg's back. "Yes. In 2 days, I'll make something new for you." Meg smiled and stroked Amy's head. He hesitated for a moment, and then looked at her seriously. "Amy, do you want to learn magic?" Chapter 91. Yes, I believe you. Meg nodded with a smile. Looking at the sensible Amy, he felt a little sorry for her. In his memory, when Meg Alex used to go out, there would often be naughty kids following behind him and imitating the way he walked. They even threw small stones at him. Although he tried his best not to let Remi see this scene, she still saw it a few times. The image of the little girl crying and standing in front of him to make those naughty kids go away was still deeply imprinted in his mind. The idea of her becoming super strong to protect him was probably born from that time. Meg looked at Amy, who had a serious expression on her little face, and couldn't help but reach out to pick her up. He held her in his arms and kissed the hair on her forehead gently. The feeling of being placed first in his heart by the person he loved the most made him feel warm in his heart, but his nose was a little sour. "Don't worry, Father will also become more and more powerful. I should be the one protecting Amy. Amy just needs to be happy every day." Meg whispered in Amy's ear. He was not a good father to let her carry so many things on her shoulders at such a young age. But Amy raised her head from Meg's arms. Meg knew what Amy wanted to say. He shook his head with a smile, and said, "The day after tomorrow is the restaurant's rest day. Let's go out and play for a whole day, and then go to chaos school. If Amy wants to learn magic, she can go and see if there are suitable magic casters there." "Really?" Amy's eyes lit up when she heard that. She looked at Meg with her big blue eyes in disbelief. However, she was a little hesitant, and said, "But Amy said that she wanted to teach Halfbeard Grandpa the fireball spell. Won't he say that I lied to him?" Meg shook his head with a smile, and said, "He's actually a very powerful magic caster, but he wanted to take Amy to a faraway place to learn magic, so he was rejected by Father. You don't have to worry that he can't learn the fireball spell, because he knows it himself." "Is that really the case?" But he didn't even manage to catch Amy's fireball. "He even burned off his beard," Amy said doubtfully. "That's because little Emi's fireball technique is really powerful. So, if you use fireball technique in the future, you must first consider whether the opponent can withstand it. Otherwise, if you use fireball technique, they might really be roasted." Meg nodded with a smile, but her expression became serious as she spoke. "Once you have power, you must learn to control it." Although Amy was still young, Meg was already planning to slowly shape her worldview. She didn't have to be a saint, but he didn't want her to grow up to be a demon. Kindness was not a bad quality, and moderation was a philosophy of life. After being smashed into this world by the heavenly axiom, he slowly began to understand this principle. No matter what, there had to be a limit. Otherwise, even if people didn't take you in, the heavens would. "Okay, Xiao Mi will remember." Amy nodded seriously. Then, she looked down at Ugly Duckling, which was squatting on the ground and looking up at them. She murmured, "If I roast it, roast it." Meow tilde Ugly Duckling seemed to have felt a chill run down its neck, and it couldn't help but shrink its head. At times like this, it felt that its little owner was very scary. "All right, then play with Ugly Duckling for a while. If you're tired, go upstairs and sleep first. I'll clean the restaurant." Meg stroked Amy's hair with a smile, and put her down on the ground. "Ugly Duckling, Mushroom Fairy, and I have to wait for Father to sleep together." Amy shook her head. She picked up Ugly Duckling and sat down on the high stool. She turned on the music box and hummed along to it. Suddenly, she looked up at Meg, who was wiping the table, and said, "Father, if I sing to Teacher Luna the next time I see her, will she be very happy?" "Of course." Meg nodded with a smile. Amy really liked Teacher Luna. However, Amy was only 4 years old, and wasn't old enough to enroll in Chaos School. Teacher Luna had taken the initiative to let her into the classroom before. Meg was also planning to contact the teachers in the school to see if they could give Amy some elementary education related to magic on their own behalf. Now that Amy had learned the fireball magic on her own, if she didn't have a basic understanding of magic, she might not be able to control this power well. She didn't want her precious daughter to become a naughty child in the eyes of others. Being childish and being uneducated were two different things. Then Amy will learn hard and sing to Father and Teacher Luna. Amy nodded. Her little face was full of seriousness as she hummed along. Meg smiled, and his hands became much more nimble. Amy was slowly getting used to not using the word adult. Although she still used it subconsciously sometimes, Meg didn't mind. Sometimes, he still found it quite cute, so he just let her be. Meg cleaned up the dining room, and marinated the cured meat that was going to be used the day after tomorrow. After washing his hands, he came out. Amy had already fallen asleep on the counter, and Ugly Duckling was also sleeping peacefully in her arms. Only the music box was still singing tirelessly, but the sound seemed to have become a little hoarse. System, the quality of this music box that sells for 5,000 can't be so bad, right? It hasn't even been a day, and it's already broken. Meg raised his eyebrows. Host, this music box doesn't have a perpetual motion machine, so when the battery runs out, the sound quality will change. Host, please buy 4 number 4 batteries to restore the music box to normal, the system's calm voice sounded. You actually gave such a high-class music box with number 4 batteries? Normally, it would at least come with a lithium battery charger. Meg felt that his soul of ridicule was awakening. This music box has a detailed manual on the introduction page, and it clearly states that the power source is 4 number 4 batteries. The system is honest, but if the host has other requirements, the system can provide modification services. There are 4 levels of packages to choose from. The system's voice was still calm. Wait. Meg looked at the list of level 4 packages that suddenly popped up in his mind. He felt as if he had stepped into the system's trap. The situation was urgent, so naturally, he didn't have time to read the manual carefully. However, the system had deliberately set a trap for him, and now it was acting as if it would change it for him if he paid more, which made him feel inexplicably uncomfortable. As for the level 4 package, it would have been better if he hadn't looked at it. After reading it, he couldn't help but want to laugh. Level 1 package, power source modification. For number 4 batteries can be modified into supercapacity lithium batteries. Charge for 3 minutes, last for 3 hours, and can be used continuously for 3 days. Modification discounted price, 10 gold coins. Free original charger. Level 2 package, power source modification plus outfit change. Provides 10 sets of cute clothes for the doll to change into. No need to disassemble, 1 button to change clothes. Modification discounted price, 20 gold coins. Chapter 92. System, Can I Swear? Mag looked at the last 2 designs that could even be upgraded to holographic projection, and the price was even 100 gold coins, then 200 gold coins. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, and say, why don't we just buy a new one? Host, please respect yourself. Insulting the system may trigger a hidden mission, the system said seriously. Okay. I bought a watch last year. It's pretty. Mag nodded. He glanced at the level 4 set that could upgrade the holographic projection and perform all kinds of dances. He was indeed tempted. However, after looking at the price of 200 gold coins, he hesitated for a while before saying, upgrade to the level 1 set. The most important thing now was to save money. Amy was still a novelty to the music box. She hadn't even learned the first song, so there was no need to upgrade it to holographic mode. 10 gold coins have been deducted. The upgrade is in progress and will be completed in 5 minutes. The battery will be fully charged after the modification, the system said. Meg looked at the empty counter where the music box used to be. The system would charge it anyway, so he didn't want to wait here. He picked up Ugly Duckling, and then slowly carried Amy upstairs. Amy was sleeping soundly, so Meg didn't want to wake her up. He put the two little ones on the bed, and then went downstairs to turn off the light. After washing up, Meg stood beside the little bed and looked at Amy, who was sleeping soundly, with a smile on his face. He didn't expect to have such a cute little daughter. This transmigration, which was supposed to be a punishment, suddenly became so beautiful. He now had many beautiful expectations and visions for his future life. Starting from the restaurant, he would slowly integrate into Chaos City and this multiracial world. The next day, Meg got up early. He had been busy the whole day, and he had started preparing ingredients. He didn't know until he became a restaurant owner that the breakfast restaurant had to start preparing in advance. He had skipped the step of buying fresh ingredients. Today's business was even better than yesterday. The fact that Ruggiamo could help one lose weight had been spread by word of mouth, so there were several groups of fat customers. The largest group was a group of 8 rich ladies, who were even bigger than Harrison and the others. When they sat down, Meg was a little worried that the chairs would collapse. Fortunately, the custom-made chairs, which cost 10 gold coins each, were quite sturdy. After eating the Ruggiamo, the scene was even more crazy. The customers nearby couldn't close their mouths. Meg didn't dare to look too much. It was a bit too much for his eyes. In the evening, a customer took a Ruggiamo and asked Meg, "Mr. Mac, the sign at the door says 1 to rest day. Is your restaurant not open tomorrow?" "That's right. The restaurant will be closed for 1 day every 6 days. Today just so happens to be the 6th day of operation, so tomorrow is the day off." Mag nodded with a smile. He had already lost count of how many times he had explained this today. "Oh, I see. I was thinking of bringing my wife and children here tomorrow." That customer was a little disappointed upon hearing that. He thought for a moment before trying to persuade Mag again. "Your business is so good, so how much money are you losing if you don't open for business for a day? Besides, if some customers come tomorrow and your restaurant is not open, they might not come again. Look at other restaurants. They're open all year round. You're making us very uncomfortable." "Yes, Mr. Mac, after eating your food, I can't eat other people's food. If I don't eat tomorrow, I will starve to death. Mr. Mac, so many of our regular customers will come here every day. If your business is going to be long-term, you can't just eat fish in 3 days and dry the net in 2 days. Isn't this torture for us?" They were a little addicted to the food, and would crave for it if they didn't eat for a day. Now that they heard that Mag was going to take a day off, they were all trying to make him change his mind. They were even threatening him. "You won't starve to death if you don't eat for a day. This is the rule set before the restaurant opened. I am the only one who can cook, and I have to leave some time to deal with other things, so I can't rest all year round." Meg shook his head and refused directly. Hearing this, the customers looked at each other. Meg didn't want to negotiate at all. Ordinary restaurant owners would tremble with fear when asking for a day off, and would even squat in the restaurant all day long for fear that their regular customers would run away. No one would be as capricious as Meg. However, these days, Meg had strictly adhered to the restaurant's opening hours. Even if there were dozens of people waiting outside, he wouldn't open the restaurant 1 minute earlier. Once the opening hours were over, even if there were still a bunch of customers who wanted to order, he would refuse without hesitation. Therefore, these words were just a struggle. After seeing off the last group of customers, Meg closed the door and breathed a long sigh of relief. Finally, he could rest tomorrow. He could understand the customer's vision of eating delicious food every day, but compared with playing with Amy, it was nothing for them to eat 1 day less every week. Not having holidays was already his biggest compromise. Today's turnover was basically the same as yesterday's, which was already the limit of what he and Amy could do. There were less than 300 Ruggiamos left, and they could unlock them after a day's rest. The power supply of the music box was changed, but Amy didn't notice that after humming along for 2 days, the little girl could now sing the whole song along with the original singer. Her musical talent was indeed not something he could compare with. Father, are we going to the school to see Teacher Luna today? Amy asked excitedly the next day, after waking up early in the morning. She climbed down from her small bed and climbed onto Meg's bed. Meg, who rarely had a day without setting an alarm, opened his eyes in a daze and happened to meet Amy's clear and bright big eyes. The curtains were pulled open a little. It was probably Amy. He glanced at the alarm clock on the bedside table. It was already 8 o'clock. He hadn't slept so well in days. Yes, the restaurant is not open today. After breakfast, we can go out and play all day. Meg nodded. He sat up, smiled, picked up Amy, who was lying on the quilt, and tickled her. Amy giggled. Amy waved her short little hands and wanted to tickle Meg too. The father and daughter's laughter echoed in the room. Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling jumped back and forth on the ground. It even tried to stand up on its hind legs to see what was going on above, but it couldn't see anything with its short legs. It could only cry aggrievedly. It was kicked out of bed again today. Chapter 93. I want 2 pigtails, and I want to wear a purple dress with a flower on the chest and white shoes. Wouldn't that make me look like the mushroom fairy? Mag nodded. Amy nodded, and then said, I want to have 2 pigtails, and wear a purple dress with a flower on the chest and white shoes. Yes, that would make you a cuter Amy fairy than the mushroom fairy. Meg nodded with a smile. He got out of bed and helped Amy change into the little dress from the wardrobe. Then he tied her hair into 2 ponytails skillfully. After this period of practice, tying hair was a piece of cake for Meg. However, Amy was very satisfied with this hairstyle and had no intention of changing it, so she didn't have a chance to show off her other hairstyles. After putting on the little white shoes, Amy turned around and looked at Meg. Father, do I look good? Yes, you are indeed a super beautiful fairy. Meg's eyes lit up, and he nodded seriously. She was even cuter than the fairy in the music box. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling came over and rubbed its head gently against Amy's calf. It felt a little wronged that no one had responded to it for so long. Ugly Duckling, don't waste the dress. You won't look pretty in it anyway. Amy bent down to pick up Ugly Duckling and sighed. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling raised its paw and put it in front of its face. It opened its eyes wide and meowed cutely, trying to prove that it wasn't ugly. You look even uglier now. Amy reached out and turned its face to the side with a look of disgust. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling turned its face away with tears of despair in its eyes. Meg shook his head with a smile. If it were another owner, this cute little orange cat would definitely be spoiled to the heavens. However, for Amy, it was just a reserve of food. She would torture it every day. After washing up and going downstairs, Meg looked at the door. There were a few customers outside looking in through the glass window. They were pleasantly surprised to see Meg. Soon, there was a knock on the door. System, do you sell removable blinds? Meg frowned slightly. He suddenly felt that he needed to add something to the glass windows when he was not in business. Otherwise, he would always feel like he was being spied on. The host currently does not have the authority to allow the system to transform the restaurant. If you want to transform the restaurant, you can upgrade the restaurant to level 1. The system will transform the restaurant once for free within a certain range. The host's serious voice sounded. Then help me measure the size of the French window, Meg said calmly. It's 3.6 meters tall, the system replied quickly. Meg nodded and said, then give me a pair of this size that can be raised and lowered, as well as the supporting parts. The system will repeat itself. The host does not have the authority to make the system modify the restaurant, the system said seriously. So, from the beginning to the end, did I allow you to modify me? I just want to buy it. Don't be so eager. Aren't you a proper gourmet system? Meg curled his lips and said with a hint of mockery. The system silently floated a line of ellipses, then said seriously, the system is a proper god of cookery system. It does not provide blinds 5 gold coins. Meg said calmly. A proper system, the system emphasized. 6 gold coins. If it's higher, I'll go buy bamboo mats. The primary color bamboo mats look good when hung up. Meg raised his eyebrows and said calmly. The system was silent, as if it was struggling. After a while, it said hesitantly, "Add a little more." "No." Meg's lips curled up. This system really had no integrity. It flatly refused. Add another 4 gold coins, and the system can provide blinds that match the color and material of the restaurant the best. It can be raised and lowered automatically. It can be hidden perfectly when it's closed and can block all prying eyes when it's down. It can also provide a full set of installation tools that can accurately position and punch holes. It's a foolproof installation. "I guarantee you'll be satisfied," the system said in a tempting voice. "Forget it. It's too heavy. I can't lift a 4-meter-long blinds. It's even more unrealistic to install them myself. I'd better go out and find a good seller who can deliver them to my door and install them for free." Meg shook his head and said regretfully. The system fell into silence again. "Father, look, the customers are here again. We're not open for business today, right?" Amy looked up at Meg and asked confusedly when she saw the customers outside who were leaning against the window and looking in and constantly knocking on the door. "Yes, we're not open for business today, but they still want to come and eat. Have a seat, and I'll go get you a glass of water before making breakfast." Meg nodded with a smile before turning and walking into the kitchen. The signboard at the entrance was already very clear. Meg planned to explain it to the customers who hadn't left yet when he left, but he was most likely going to get a lot of sighs again. Meg wasn't in a hurry to urge the system, which had fallen silent. In any case, he couldn't be bothered to do it himself. After all, it was unrealistic for him to install such a large blinds on his own. However, if he asked someone else to help him with the automatic design, he would have to explain a lot of things, so it was naturally easiest for the system to do the installation. Why can't these guys let Father have a good day's rest? Furthermore, we're going to see Teacher Luna today. Amy looked back at Meg as she softly murmured to herself. She clenched her little fists and walked toward the door with Ugly Duckling in her arms. There were still a dozen or so customers outside the door. Some of them hadn't come for breakfast yesterday, so they didn't hear Meg's explanation, while others had come early in the morning to try their luck after hearing Meg's explanation. Perhaps Mr. Mack would open the door after seeing so many customers. However, the restaurant, which usually opened at 7:30, was still closed today. Seeing the countdown on the door, many customers left after waiting for a long while. After all, they couldn't afford to disrupt the rhythm of their day for breakfast. Some customers, who had walked a long way to get here, were unwilling to leave without eating. So, a dozen or so of them stayed behind and discussed whether they would say something nice to Meg or say something harsh to make Meg make a Ruggiamo for each of them before they left. Sargeras was also in the crowd. He had been lucky yesterday to complete a high-level mission and kill 3 flamingos. He had received a reward of 80 gold coins, and had saved some gold coins to come for breakfast today. However, such a mission didn't come every day, and it depended on luck to complete it on the first try. So, his original plan of 10 Ruggiamos per meal was reduced to 5. He had heard Meg's explanation yesterday, but before he went to accept the mission, he still wanted to try his luck. Now, he stood behind the crowd and didn't rush forward. When they heard that Meg was coming downstairs, they all looked at the door expectantly, hoping that Meg would change his mind after seeing their enthusiasm. Ding dong. The bell at the door rang, and the door slowly opened inwards. Their expectant eyes were disappointed. They looked down and saw Amy holding the little orange cat with a cold face. Chapter 94. The door suddenly became quiet. The guests looked at each other and looked at Remi, who was holding the kitten and putting her little fist in front of her face. She squinted her eyes and pouted her little mouth. She was trying hard to act fierce. The words that they had prepared were all forcefully swallowed back down. "I'm leaving. She's so cute even when she's fierce." Sargeras took a look at Amy, then turned and left slowly. It seemed that he had to buy some barbecue and eat it on the way. Then he would take on a high-level mission and try to live a life where he could eat 10 Ruggiamos in one meal as soon as possible. Phut, so cute. A girl couldn't help laughing. Many customers had seen Amy burn the lava demon with a fireball the day before yesterday. Later, She even used a fireball to burn off the beard of the sorcerer. Not only was the sorcerer not angry, he even wanted to take her as his disciple. So, Amy's words were quite intimidating. After all, she dared to burn a demon, and they didn't have the demon's resistance. Didn't they see the demon sneak away after hearing her words? So, they hesitated for a moment, then left. Boss Mag is indeed a man of his word. However, sending his daughter out to solve the problem is too cruel. I'm clearly unhappy, but I can't get angry. How infuriating. A customer heaved a forlorn sigh before bursting into laughter. Yeah, I walked 20 minutes to come here today. But it's not easy for Mr. Mac to run the restaurant alone. He dotes on his daughter so much, so it's normal that he wants to spend some time with her, the person next to him echoed. The rest of the onlookers, who didn't know the truth, looked at Amy, who wasn't going to be reasonable, and then looked at the customers who left without hesitation. They hesitated for a moment, then also left. She's really a little helper. Meg, who came out with a glass of water, saw this scene and couldn't help laughing. He had been thinking about how to explain to the customers so that they wouldn't be sad. He thought he would have to wrangle with them for a while, but he didn't expect Amy to open the door and threaten them directly. Then all the customers left, which saved him a lot of trouble. Father, I told them to go home obediently. When I was super fierce, they were really afraid of me. Amy turned around and looked at Meg with a cute smile on her face again. Her big eyes were saying, hurry up and praise me. Yes, Xiao Mi is the best. You've helped father a lot. Meg smiled and nodded. However, when the little brat was super fierce, it was completely cheating by acting cute. It could only be said that those customers were also very cute. Yes, yes. Amy will do more things for father in the future. Amy nodded and took a few sips of water from the glass. She then looked down at Ugly Duckling in her arms with a conflicted expression, and said, But father, are we going to take Ugly Duckling to see Teacher Luna? I'm afraid it's too ugly and will scare Teacher Luna. Why don't we just leave it at home? Meow meow. Ugly Duckling immediately panicked when it heard that it was going to be left at home. It looked up at Amy and meowed with its eyes full of pleading and resentment. Ugly Duckling hasn't eaten yet, so we still have to take it out later. We'll buy it some goat's milk on the way. Meg shook his head. Besides, Miss Luna should like it. After all, Ugly Duckling, which was only a little bigger than an adult's palm, was actually a very cute little orange cat. It was just that Amy's first impression was the strongest, and she probably thought it was ugly no matter how she looked at it. However, after interacting with it for the past few days, she had been quite nice to it. Amy nodded and looked at Ugly Duckling seriously as she warned, All right, then when we see Teacher Luna later, you must cover your face. You can't scare her or the other children. Ugly Duckling didn't know whether it understood or not, but it just nodded vigorously and pretended to understand. After breakfast, Meg took out the small basket that the herb gatherer had given him and put the little milk bottle in the basket with a soft towel in the middle. When Amy got tired of carrying it, she could also put Ugly Duckling in the basket. If they bought something on the way, they could also put it in the basket and carry it. Then, they went out in this way. Meg changed into a black-grey robe today. This was the common clothing in this world. It was a little similar to the traditional Chinese clothing, but it didn't have as many layers as the traditional Chinese clothing, and the tailoring was more neat and simple. After all, in this alternate world, there was no telling when they would run into danger. Simple and comfortable clothes were suitable for fighting and escaping. Meg's robe was the system's improved version, and it was tailor-made, so it fit very well. The pure cotton material was much more comfortable than the cotton and linen material in this world, and it looked very energetic. The black-grey robe looked more mature, but it looked a little funny when he was carrying a small basket in his hand. When they passed by the magic potion shop, Amy, Black Coal, and Green Pea tripped over each other as usual. Ugly Duckling was a little hostile to Black Coal, but it couldn't even jump up to Amy's knees now, let alone Black Coal, who was hanging at the height of a person. It could only cry out a few times in Amy's arms. Meg smiled and nodded at Julian, then left with Amy and continued walking. Father, are we going to the school now? Amy looked up at Meg and asked. We'll go to a place to do something first, then go to the school. Meg shook his head with a smile. Other than going to the agency to ask for an employee, he had another place to go. Millimeterchum, okay. Amy nodded. Although she really wanted to sing for Teacher Luna right now, she had to listen to her father if he had something to do. In this world, employment agencies were commonly referred to as job agencies. They had gradually appeared after Chaos City became prosperous. Their business had gradually expanded from simply helping workshops and adventurers' guilds recruit suitable employees and members to various fields. Even hiring nannies was only one of the branches. Meg and Amy stopped in front of a shop called Guanluor Job Agency. It was a 20-square-meter shop. There were 2 rectangular wooden boards in front of the door, with a few pieces of paper pasted on them. Neatly written, each job position and number of employees were listed, as well as a simple introduction of the benefits. However, most of the words were face-to-face. Meg glanced at the information on the board. Other than the normal jobs for workshops, there were also all kinds of missions for adventurers' guilds, and what abilities they needed to recruit. This kind of information should have been in the guilds column, but now it was there. There was a separate section for waiters and nannies. At a glance, the basic benefits of waiters were 3 meals a day. The average salary was 3,000 copper coins, and the working hours were usually from morning to night. It was a typical example of a job with a low salary and long working hours. Meg's expression became a little interesting when he saw the information in a small section at the bottom right corner. Looking for a succubus or elven girlfriend. Daily salary starting at 5 gold coins. Exact price will be negotiated based on appearance and skills. Looking for a demon fighter. Must have a scary appearance and be able to withstand a 3rd-tier magic caster's magic. Most importantly, must have a scary appearance. The scarier, the higher the salary. Looking for an elven or human male idol. Must be handsome, know how to coax people, and do it 7 times a night. Daily salary starting at 10 gold coins. Salary can be increased if the job is good. Chapter 95. What the hell is this? Meg raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect this intermediary to be a pimp. How shameless. Although it was still morning, the office was already crowded with people from all races, including humans, orcs, demons, and even angels. They were all squeezed in front of the wall filled with recruitment slips, reading carefully. From time to time, someone would call out a serial number and then communicate with the staff next to them. It seemed that they were all here to look for a job, and they got along very well here. A rather coquettish succubus walked over and winked at Meg, but seeing that he didn't pay any attention to her, she withdrew her gaze and looked directly at the special column. Her eyes suddenly lit up, and she shouted into the office, "Boss, I want to try this girlfriend. I think I can get 10 gold coins a night." "Coming." Someone immediately responded, and a balding middle-aged man with a mustache trotted out. He first looked at Meg and Amy, then smiled and greeted the succubus. "Miss Barbler, with your skills, you can even get 15 gold coins a night, let alone 10 gold coins. Come in and register first, and we will inform the investor today. Maybe the transaction can start tonight." "Okay." The succubus nodded. She flicked her fiery red hair at Meg and walked inside, swaying her graceful waist. The smell of cheap perfume that hit him in the face made Meg frown. He had seen all kinds of women in the past, and he despised this kind of bitch who thought she was good with heavy makeup. His taste had changed a few times as he grew older, but he still couldn't get the charm of this kind of woman. In fact, he was even a little disgusted. They were both succubi, but he admired the domineering older sister more. Of course, it was just admiration. Amy looked at the succubus with a wary expression, and slowly withdrew her hand. This woman with a scarily pale face was trying to seduce father. If she dared to take another step forward, she would have a taste of her fireball magic. The balding middle-aged man looked at Meg with a smile, then turned to Amy, and said, "Hello, sir. I am Chris, the owner of the Broad Recruitment Agency. How can I help you?" He was a little surprised by the cute half-elf girl. Judging from the way he was dressed, Meg was most likely a rich investor. Furthermore, the fact that he had a half-elf daughter indicated that he was very rich. After all, most men who married an elf would be in a very awkward situation. Furthermore, he was showing off his half-elf daughter in public meant that he was still in control of the family's finances. I want to find a waitress for the restaurant. Meg had initially thought that this agency was a little unreliable, but after thinking about it, he realized that this was an alternate world, and there was a red light district behind the Aden Square that was open every day, so this wasn't a big deal. This agency was quite large, so it probably had a lot of talent. Do you have any specific requirements? Chris nodded, and then explained, among the waitresses that we have in our agency, there are 3 categories. 1, average looks, hardworking, and the salary requirements are slightly lower. 2, average looks, hardworking, and the salary requirements are medium. 3, beautiful looks, human, succubus, angel. The salary requirements are higher, and the position is more toward the restaurant's business card. The requirements for working hours are slightly higher, and their endurance is relatively lower. So the salary requirements are only based on looks. Meg raised an eyebrow. Those who weren't hardworking could earn high salaries as long as they were good-looking. This really was a world where looks were everything. Many restaurants can increase their turnover by a lot if they find a beautiful waitress. If it's a beautiful and open succubus waitress, the sales of drinks can easily double, so this is a very worthwhile investment. Chris' voice was tinged with a hint of temptation, and he smiled as he said, also, many high-priced waitresses don't mind having sex with young bosses. As for working hours, you can also find a couple of hardworking waitresses. Wouldn't that be killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Do you have information on second-rate waitresses? I'd like to take a look. Meg shook his head slightly. All men knew what Chris was implying, but he was never going to rely on a few flirtatious waitresses to increase the number of customers in his restaurant. He wasn't interested in those bitches anyway. What he needed now was a waitress who was quick on her feet and didn't talk much. Of course, her looks couldn't be too frightening, but at the very least, she had to be pleasing to the eyes of the customers. If there was an employee who met this condition, he wouldn't mind giving her a higher salary. Anyway, the restaurant's business was steadily increasing, and improving the overall efficiency would definitely earn him more than paying a single employee. His restaurant didn't need a good-looking vase. I see. Okay, please come in. There's a reception room on the 2nd floor. You can take your time looking around. Chris nodded and led Meg into the room. Half an hour later, Meg walked out with Amy, a little disappointed. There was indeed a lot of information, but Meg didn't find anyone pleasing to the eye. They were either too old, or a little lacking in temperament. While being hardworking and capable, it would be best if their temperament could be more compatible with the restaurant. This way, the customer's dining experience would be improved. Mr. Mack, I'll keep an eye out for you. If there's someone who meets your requirements, I'll send someone to contact you immediately, Chris said with a smile as he walked out. If it weren't for the fact that Meg didn't look like he was deliberately looking for trouble, he would have scolded him a little. After accompanying him for half an hour to look at the information, he still didn't find anyone suitable. Okay, thank you. Meg nodded. Goodbye, Uncle Bird's Nest. Amy waved her little hand at Chris. Bye. Bye. Chris's face twitched. What the hell is Uncle Bird's Nest? But he still had to maintain a smile. They went to the market to buy some goat's milk to feed Ugly Duckling, and then Meg took Amy to an intelligence-gathering shop. It was a human's private detective agency. He spent 10 gold coins to investigate Crassus and the owner of the magic potion shop next door. Of course, the more detailed, the better. Both of them coveted Amy, so he wanted to find out more about them first to see if they were good or bad. Meg didn't have time to collect information himself, so it was obviously a good choice to spend some money to find a professional. After all, the price could be offset by a few Ruggiamos, and it was much easier than relying on others. Father, can we go to the school now? Amy looked up at Meg. They had gone to 2 places in a row, and Ugly Duckling was about to fall asleep in her arms. Chapter 96. The Chaos School was an educational institution under the Grey Temple. According to the age and stage of the students, it was divided into 2 parts, the kindergarten and the How High Kindergarten. The kindergarten was for children from 5 to 12 years old. At that time, they were mainly taught basic knowledge such as the common language, arithmetic, and general knowledge. At the same time, they would develop some special abilities such as magic, perception, calculation, and so on. When they reached a certain level and met the test requirements of the How High Kindergarten, they would automatically be promoted to the How High Kindergarten to further their studies, and there would be special teachers to teach them. Those who couldn't pass the test by the age of 12 would lose the opportunity to stay in the chaos school and be expelled. The ratio was about 5 to 1. Most of the students who graduated from the How High Kindergarten would be recruited by the Grey Temple to become the new blood of the Grey Temple, thus maintaining the high quality and loyalty of the members of the Grey Temple. Meg didn't dislike this complete supply chain, because every graduate had the freedom to choose whether to work in the Grey Temple or not. Furthermore, not every graduate would be recruited by the Grey Temple. They had to pass the test first. This reminded him of the civil service system in his previous life. Also, the best thing that the Chaos School did was to popularize knowledge on a large scale in Chaos City. After the integration of the Norland continent, the human and elven languages became the common language of the Norland continent. However, it wasn't easy for other races to learn this language and writing. Even Haga, the son of a tribal chief, could barely communicate in the common language. The kindergarten of the Chaos School accepted over 1,000 students every year. The annual tuition was only 5 gold coins. Compared to the tuition of 50 gold coins in private schools, this was practically compulsory education. Also, the students in the Chaos School weren't divided into classes according to race. Your classmates could be a demon and an elf, or a dwarf sitting in front of you and a troll sitting behind you. This was also a unique experience in Chaos City. After more than 100 years of development, the Grey Temple and Chaos School were the main reason why Chaos City was able to have such a harmonious atmosphere. After all, if two people of different races were walking on the streets, they might be from the same school, so they would all be familiar with each other. As such, the animosity between different races would lessen significantly. Furthermore, the residents of Chaos City were far more cultured than the residents of other regions on the continent, and this was also an important reason. Meg and Amy were standing outside the gate of the sprawling Chaos School. It was class time, and the old guard and the tall orc standing at the gate had clearly refused their request to enter the school. They were told to contact Teacher Luna after school so that they could enter the school. "Looks like we're early." Meg glanced at the large clock at the entrance of Chaos School. It was 10:30 a.m., and the third period hadn't ended yet. School would end at around 11:30 a.m. "Father, we can sneak in," Amy said softly as she looked at the stern orc and tugged at Meg's sleeve. "Sneak in?" Meg looked at Amy in surprise. "Millimeter. There's a place we can go in. They didn't let me in before, so I always sneaked in." Amy nodded. 10 minutes later, Meg looked back at the gap covered by 2 lush branches. He couldn't help but pat Amy's head with a smile. This little girl was really something. "I know which classroom Teacher Luna is in. Father, let's go and take a look." Amy grabbed Meg's finger and walked to the left with ease. Meg could tell that Amy really wanted to see Miss Luna, so he let her go. She used to watch from outside the classroom anyway. The classrooms in Chaos School were 2-story buildings made of a mixture of stone and wood. The 4 walls were stacked with square black stones, while the roof and the second floor were made of wood. There were windows on both sides to ensure that the classrooms were well lit. The sound of reading could be heard coming from one building after another. All of the buildings were painted sky blue and grass green, and the colors looked very bright and fresh. Many of the walls were painted with childlike drawings, which were most likely drawn by the students. There were styles of all races, and they blended together harmoniously here. The person who founded the Grey Temple must have been a great man with great foresight. Meg looked at those drawings, and seemed to see the future that person had envisioned. If this idea could be spread out with Chaos City as the center, and the entire continent could be truly integrated, then the racial war 100 years ago would most likely not happen again. This idea coincides with my thoughts. If all the races on the continent are integrated, there will definitely be more and more half-races. When they become an important part of the entire continent, the discrimination against them will naturally disappear. Meg was deep in thought, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. Perhaps I can witness the arrival of a great era in my lifetime. If I can add some fuel to the fire, that would be a good thing. Father, what are you smiling about? Amy looked at Meg with a perplexed expression. She thought for a moment, and said, I know. You're very happy because you want to see Teacher Luna, right? Perhaps. Perhaps it was the sound of reading that made Meg's mood improve a lot. This atmosphere was really good. When Amy is of school age next year, I should let her come to school. It's much better than staying at home with me every day. With Amy's fireball magic, I don't have to worry about anyone bullying her at school. Me too. I'm super happy. Amy also nodded. However, she quickly put a finger in front of her mouth and shushed them. She pointed at the classroom next to them, and said, Teacher Luna is teaching in that classroom. Let's sneak over and don't make a sound. Meg nodded, and didn't say anything. He walked quietly, and followed Amy to the window. There were 2 black square stones stacked under the windowsill. Amy hesitated for a moment before slowly stepping on them. They were just at the height of the windowsill. Looks like these stones were specially prepared for Amy. Meg looked at the 2 stones with surprise. There were no stones under the other windowsills, and the height was just right for Amy. Miss Luna's voice came from the classroom. Standing outside the classroom, it sounded very gentle. It was the kind of voice that could guide students to study, and it made people feel at ease and comfortable. The content of her lecture was simple multiplication. Because there was no multiplication table or decimal system, the algorithm was very complicated. Just a question of 7 by 9 was enough to make Meg dizzy. It was really difficult for 6 or 7-year-old children. Amy listened quietly, and her eyes seemed to light up as she looked into the classroom. Meg also stood quietly behind her. It was fine if he listened in, but it was a little inappropriate to disturb others in class. Chapter 97. Meg looked down and saw that ugly duckling, which had been asleep for a while, had woken up. After it called out once, it looked at Amy and called out a few more times, each time louder than the last. Meg cursed in his heart. The classroom quieted down immediately. Luna looked at the window in confusion, thinking that some stray cat had run into the school and attracted the attention of the students. However, she soon saw Amy. Her eyes lit up, and she quickly walked to the door in surprise. It's Amy. Long time no see. Wow, your hair is so beautiful. A girl with mushroom hair sitting by the window saw Amy, and her eyes lit up immediately as she spoke happily. Sure, Daphne. Don't call my name in class, and don't talk to me, Amy quickly said. Why are you here again? You're causing me a lot of trouble like this. Do you know that? A little demon child with messy hair and a green bean sprout like grass on his head said seriously to Amy. Shut up, Ignatsu. Be careful or I'll pull out that bean sprout of yours again, Daphne said fiercely as she turned to glare at the little demon child. I'm not afraid of you, Ignatsu said as he leaned back, putting on a brave front. Ugly duckling, don't call out. Otherwise, I'll roast you and eat you. Amy turned to glare at Ugly Duckling in the basket, and reprimanded it. Ugly Duckling was probably traumatized by this sentence since it was an egg. It immediately cowered in the basket and shivered, not daring to call out again. Meg stroked its fur gently to calm it down. This trauma was probably going to follow it for the rest of its life. Amy, you're here. Luna walked out of the door with a piece of chalk in her hand and a smile on her face. Halfway through her sentence, she saw Meg standing behind her with a small basket in his hand. She paused in surprise. Teacher Luna, I'm here to listen to your lecture and see you. I also want to sing for you. Amy looked at Luna with a happy smile on her little face. But when she looked around the classroom, she said dejectedly, but I think I'm affecting everyone's class again. Meg patted Amy's head and looked at Luna apologetically. I'm sorry, I was the one who brought the child here. The cat was careless and meowed twice and disturbed Miss Luna's class. Today, Luna was wearing a powder blue maxi dress. She was still wearing the same silk scarf with a golden lily embroidered on it. It seemed that she really liked that scarf. When she looked at Amy, she had a gentle smile on her face. Of course not. The kitten's meowing piqued the curiosity of the children. Besides, everyone misses Amy, who hasn't come for many days. Luna looked at the dejected Amy and Meg, who was taking all the blame on himself. She smiled and reached out to hold Amy's little hand. In a gentle voice, she said, "Bring your new friend and introduce her to everyone. After that, sing the song that you want to sing for me." Meg looked at Luna. In that instant, her face seemed to be glowing. He was a little touched by her gentle encouragement. She really was a good teacher. Really? Amy's eyes lit up again. She looked at Luna with an encouraging smile on her face. She got down from the rock and picked up Ugly Duckling from the basket. She looked at Meg and said, "Father, then I want to go, Amy. You can do it." Meg smiled with an encouraging expression on his face. Luna also looked at Meg with a little surprise. It was rare to see a father who could understand his daughter's feelings and know how to encourage her. Thinking of the ruggiamo that she had eaten the other day, Luna's heart raced involuntarily. Although the reaction after eating it was a little shameful, the young Jew fried rice and ruggiamo were really delicious. If it weren't for the fact that the money sent by her family this month had been used to buy food for the children, she probably wouldn't have been able to resist the urge to eat it again. This man's cooking is so good. She had never tasted anything better than this. Thinking back to it now, she still couldn't help but salivate. "Okay." Hearing Meg's encouragement, Amy's face immediately lit up with confidence. She held Luna's hand and walked into the classroom. Meg stood by the window, smiling at Amy, who was wearing a purple dress and holding Ugly Duckling in her arms. Standing here again, she was no longer the little girl in shabby clothes. What he hoped more was that she could become more confident. "Our Amy hasn't come to class for many days. Do you miss her very much?" Luna looked at the children below the podium and said with a smile, "Yes, I miss her so much." Daphne was the first to cry out. She looked at Amy, who had changed into a new dress and tied up her beautiful hair, as if she had become a completely different person. "Not really." Ignatzu shook his head, but he couldn't take his eyes off Amy. How did she suddenly become so beautiful and delicate like a porcelain doll? The other children also looked at Amy curiously. How did the half-elf with messy hair who always wore shabby clothes in their memories become so beautiful and cute all of a sudden? She was much cuter than the little elf in the next class. And when the children's eyes fell on Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms, their eyes lit up. It was so fluffy and small, but it was so cute. They really wanted to hug it and touch it. And it was white and orange. It was different from the black and white cats outside. It looked even cuter. It was the first time Amy had received so many admiring and envious gazes. She was nervous, but also very happy. No one was looking at her with disgust and pity anymore. This feeling was so good, and she couldn't help but smile. Luna also had a smile on her face. Although she had always wanted to make Remi more confident, every time she was bullied, the little girl would become more depressed and lose confidence. But after not seeing her for a few days, Amy seemed to have become a completely different person. Not only did her clothes change, but more importantly, her heart became stronger, and she became more confident. She was no longer troubled by the difference between herself and others. Naturally, it could only be Meg who had brought about this change. This made Luna a little curious. Why did Meg suddenly become so caring and protective of Amy, as if he had become a different person? Amy brought a new friend today, and she even prepared a song to sing for everyone, Luna said with a smile as she looked at Amy encouragingly. "This is Ugly Duckling, my..." Amy hugged Ugly Duckling and introduced it, but she soon stopped, as if she was a little conflicted about its position. After a while, she said, "Father said it will become a white swan when it grows up. Before it grows up, it will be my pet." A white swan. The children's curiosity was immediately piqued. They looked at the orange kitten in Amy's arms, and couldn't understand how this cute kitten was ugly. It didn't look like a duck at all. And would it really become a white swan when it grew up? Chapter 98. Because it's ugly, Amy said matter-of-factly. Then, she added, And it came out of an egg. I've never seen such an ugly duckling before. It came out of an egg. If it's a duckling, then it's really ugly. Yeah, a duckling that looks like a kitten. It's so strange. No wonder its color is different from normal kittens. But it's so ugly and cute. After hearing Amy's words, the children very easily accepted the fact that ugly duckling really was an ugly duckling. As a duckling, it was indeed very ugly to look like a kitten, but it also looked quite cute. Meow. Ugly duckling protested feebly. It was clearly so cute. Luna looked at ugly duckling in Amy's arms, and also felt that it was so furry and cute. She really wanted to give it a hug. She naturally didn't believe Amy's words that it could become a white swan. It seemed that Meg was wrong. I want to sing a song for Teacher Luna and everyone today. Amy's confidence was greatly boosted after receiving everyone's approval. She looked at Meg outside the window with a smile, and continued, "It's called Little Girl Who Picks Mushrooms." "This guy clearly doesn't know anything," Ignatsu murmured. Ignatsu muttered under his breath, but after Daphne glared at him, he shut his mouth obediently. However, he still didn't believe that Remi could sing any good songs. "Yes, I'm looking forward to it," Luna said with a smile. Little Aunt Who Picks Mushrooms carries a big bamboo basket. Amy held Ugly Duckling in her arms and began to sing earnestly. Her soft and lively voice immediately attracted the attention of the children. It was as if an arrow had struck the softest part of their hearts, and smiles appeared on their faces involuntarily. "My daughter really is the best." Meg looked at the children in the classroom who were enchanted by her singing, then looked at Amy, and his heart was filled with pride. This was the first time that he had heard Amy sing this song in its entirety. Even though there was no accompaniment, Amy's soft voice was still very pleasant to listen to. In fact, he felt that it was even better than the music on the music box. Very good. Ignatsu's eyes were wide open, and the green bean sprout on his head swayed left and right, looking very happy. Amy is so awesome. Daphne cupped her chin in her hands, completely turning into a fangirl. The other children also had similar expressions. They were a little surprised at how Amy had suddenly become so amazing. Then, their feelings slowly turned into envy and admiration. She was really amazing. It's a nice nursery rhyme, but why haven't I heard this song before? Could it be a children's song from somewhere? Did he teach Amy? Luna was also pleasantly surprised. She had thought that Amy would sing the nursery rhyme she had taught her before, but she did not expect her to sing a nursery rhyme that she had never heard before. She could not help but glance at Meg outside the window. Could it be that he had also taught Amy this song? After she finished singing, Amy looked at the audience below the podium, feeling a little embarrassed but also a little expectant. She did not know if she had sung well. Nice. Ignatsu was the first to clap his hands, and then there was a burst of applause and praise in the classroom. A bright smile appeared on Amy's face. This was the first time she had been acknowledged by so many people, and they were all her peers. This feeling was unprecedented. Yes, I also think that Amy sang very well. Thank you for bringing us such a nice song. Luna also nodded with a smile. You're welcome. Amy nodded happily. She looked back at the question on the blackboard, hesitated for a moment, and then looked at Luna and said, "Teacher Luna, I know how to solve this question." Luna was stunned for a moment. She looked at the 7x8 calculation question on the blackboard. This was a question that they had only taught today. The algorithm was a little complicated, and only a few of the more talented students in the class had been able to solve it. Most of the students did not know how to solve it. Amy had not been in class for the past few days, so how could she have solved this question? You definitely can't solve it. This question is a little difficult. Only I can solve it, a little boy in a blue and white shirt in the first row said, his face full of pride. I think it's very simple, Amy said seriously as she looked at the boy. How is that possible? Then solve it for me first. The little boy looked unconvinced. There were only a few students in the class who could solve this question, but Amy said it was very simple. He did not believe it. The other children had similar expressions and felt that Amy definitely could not solve it. Only math geniuses like Teacher Luna and Palmer could solve such a question. Meg looked at the sudden argument and was a little surprised and wanted to laugh. However, this level of multiplication was too easy for Amy, who had memorized the multiplication table. It was time to let them feel the fear of being dominated by the multiplication table. Teacher Luna wanted to ease the atmosphere and bring the matter to an end. After all, Amy had just become confident. It would not be good if she lost her confidence because of this. The answer is 56, Amy looked at Palmer and said calmly. Is it really 56? The children were a little confused. Teacher Luna had not finished explaining how to calculate it, so they did not know the answer. They could only look at Teacher Luna and Palmer. How did you know? Palmer suddenly stood up and stared at Amy. Then he looked at the answer written on the notebook in front of him with a look of disbelief. I calculated it. Amy nodded slightly. The answer is 56. Teacher Luna was no less shocked than the other students. She knew better than anyone that Amy's learning progress was definitely not at this level. However, she was able to answer the question correctly without using a pen and paper. She could not help but wonder if Meg had told Amy the answer when they were outside the classroom. You got it right. Amy is really awesome. Daphne smiled happily. Ignatsu looked at Amy strangely from behind, as if this was the first time he had met her. How did she suddenly become as good as Palmer? After receiving Teacher Luna's approval, the other students looked at Amy in a different light. Amy actually knew the answer to a question that no one else could solve with just one look. Didn't that mean she was even better than Palmer? I don't believe it. She must be lucky to get it right. Teacher Amy, give me 5 more questions. Let's see who can solve it first. Palmer felt that his throne as the #1 math genius was being threatened, so he looked at Luna and begged. I agree, Amy said coldly. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.